Okay.
All right, Mr. Dent, please, prayer.
Father, we thank you right now. Just bless you, Father. We don't get tired of calling on your name because your name is the only name you've been taught that man can be saved. And we bless you again now. Help us, God. We go into this workshop. Thank you for what you're going to do again. And we bless your holy name. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome everyone to our workshop Tuesday, March 28, 2023 at 6 p.m. We have a conference line set up. The number is 1917-900-1022. Access code is 32347#. This is not a toll-free number, and you may be sent long distance charges according to your long distance plan. When the chairperson opens the meeting for public comment, please follow the below instructions. If you wish to speak, please dial *5. The moderator will unmute your line when it's your turn to speak and notify you by announcing the last 4 digits of your telephone number. Please announce your name and address. You will be allowed to speak for 3 minutes. Any person wishing to address the board regarding an agenda item would be given 3 minutes for comment. Commenters can only speak 1 time for each agenda item. This is a workshop, so we will not be any voting, just discussion. I had a request to move item number 4 to the top above number 3, so the board is okay there. We'll start with the Granger Bridge. For the board to continue discussion regarding the Granger Bridge.
And do you want to begin the discussion?
Well,
So we're continuing the discussion. This would be, I guess, the fourth public discussion that we've had on the Granger Bridge replacement project. As you all know, this is a timber bridge that was closed back in 2019 after being declared structurally deficient, which then prompted it to become eligible as a candidate for the Federal Bridge Replacement Program. The DOT has chosen the mechanism of a local agency project. So we are actually the ones who are bringing this bridge project to completion using federal funds. Since that has initiated, there has been one teleconference public meeting, a public meeting with a live public meeting at the Steenhatchee Community Center, and then another discussion, obviously, here tonight. So what we are is here to kind of give you a display of, there were many comments that stemmed on the concern of the overall size or the nature of what was being proposed relative to what was there currently today. Let me see if I can get your mouse from there. So what you see over to the right is a rendering that was put together. I think this is going to be the same thing. So what this is showing you today is, here is the way it looks today with the wooden structurally deficient bridge. You can see this is coming in from the north, and then this is more of the northeast access point. And then when we show this is, you're seeing the alignment as we are proposing it is sliding more to the east, which softens the curve to make that transition much easier. And then you see extensions coming back down to these adjoining properties. What you will notice is that from it is here, we are discussing and working with this adjacent landowner here for these impacts to move onto his property. That is part of the right-of-way acquisition component of it. And then what you may also notice is, excuse me, I went the wrong way. This being a very narrow road coming through here, we wanted to at least try to minimize the overall impact of what we were going to replace, so we went with a single lane configuration. But realizing that you have opposing directions of traffic, you will see that you have a separation of lanes here, a yield point, which allows the oncoming traffic to traverse the bridge, and then once that path is cleared, then that vehicle then can make its way across the bridge. That is done on both sides. This is one view here, and then what you can see, this is a different perspective and how the bridge will look. It actually seems to, in my opinion, as a designer, it seems to fit very well in there. Definitely gives it a much cleaner look from the way it is today, and also offers the longevity of a bridge which we aren't fortunate to have at this point with the timber bridge. So this is what we are at the PD&E design, quasi-design phase of this. So we have kind of put together a concept that Mr. Jarrett and Michael had presented. I'm sorry, these are my support group from behind, our Taylor County support group, excuse me, that are behind us. They're the ones with the expertise that is bringing a lot of this to the table. So we went back and forth for quite some time trying to achieve the objectives that was voiced during the 2019 discussions when the bridge originally was closed. Tried to put all of those concerns into a basket, match them all up, and this is what eventually came out, with trying to satisfy all of those and yet provide something that we felt was going to fit within that community. So we pitched that proposal to the public, and that was the source of the discussions at the teleconference as well as the live public meetings, and what we are continuing here today. So we are at the point that we are suggestive of continuing forward with this process to replace this bridge in the concept that you have today, and we'll be available for questions.
Mr. Chair, we've got several letters that were sent that need to be read, and also I would like to hear from the people here before we go on.
Well, do you have any letters from the people?
I do.
Sure. Well, does anyone have any questions for Mr. Dudley from the board?
I do have questions in respect to acquisitions. Is there any concept as what those costs are going to be in proposing the additional footage that this would require?
Acreage wise?
I don't need some footage, but I just want to understand. I think the proposed cost is at $3 million, but that, I don't think.
Actually, you're talking now about a full project cost and not necessarily construction component or right of way. That's the sum of the components.
Yeah, but I don't think that part was inclusive in the numbers that I saw with respect to proposed cost.
Actually, it was. The right of way acquisition cost is the 1, 2, 3, third line down from the brochures that we presented to you guys last time.
And is that inclusive of the design and the permitting?
No, sir. Design is the second line item, which would PD&E would be, and design should be your permitting, inclusive of permitting, excuse me. And then right-of-way acquisition is subsequent to that, construction, and then CEI after that. All of those are inclusive in the overall $3 million budget.
Is that also inclusive of any mitigation requirements?
Yes, sir.
So any kind of mitigation credit purchases are already in this cost analysis?
I knew the answer was yes, but I wanted confirmation.
And what's the estimate for the mitigation impacts?
You're welcome to come on.
Or I should say the wetland impacts and the mitigation requirements.
And you're speaking, I think, you're speaking specifically to the acquisition of mitigation credits.
Indeed.
Okay, so there will be partial credits that will be acquired for this project.
So as of right now, and again, when it gets further along in design, we'll have a better understanding. We're anticipating a general permit through the Water Management District, which would not require credits. Through, in this case, it's Army Corps. It'll just depend on how many final wetland impacts we have. But we're anticipating at most a tenth, and if it's under a tenth, more than likely, we won't get any credits for those.
Well, and the reason my question is of such, because lately, we may have assumed that there was gonna be a minor impact of cost, but it was not such. Now, this was in a pavement project, so it's not on the First Avenue project, so.
Yeah, there's some different methodology that, or ideologies that are going around at the DEP level. Some of that is growing pains where DEP is taking over some of the Army Corps responsibilities. There's some definitions that are getting kind of flushed out right now. At a tenth of an acre, it really depends on the quality of what you're affecting versus pristine, which then could decrease how much of a credit that you require. Obviously, that you may remember from the First Avenue, those saltwater mitigation credits, and I expect we'll hit a brine level that would, I'm assuming this is brackish versus, so just the worst case scenario would be, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was 400,000 or so for a full credit, but you're not gonna see that type of impact at all to that level for this. Even the First Avenue, you remember that was a total of 0.46 mitigation credits. And I wanna say 0.26 of that maybe was saltwater. And that total of those, that salt and fresh was 148,000, I believe.
But I would also say that project had similar assumptions in respect to not budgeting for the potential purchase.
There are,
And that's why I want to understand that from here.
there are exclusions and exemptions.
I mean, I know you don't have a crystal ball, and we are not trying to get to that kind of finite understanding, but.
There are exemptions and exclusions for linear transportation projects that we try to maximize. We obviously push the definition of what is exemptable. The number he just threw out was a threshold that's written into that rule. So obviously, we will have to identify the limit of disturbance, quantify that overall surface area, and then that's what goes into your UMAN calculation to say whether you can or can't. So obviously, we will try to minimize what has to be mitigated. You're seeing vertical surfaces here versus slope surfaces coming out, which concentrates your area of impact. Aligning it after you get beyond the water course on top of and coincident with an existing roadway limits your area of impact. So all of those factors are working together to minimize how much of a overall environmental impact that we have, which is a primary objective of the bridge project.
And if I'm looking correctly at this drawing, it looks like there's gonna be some displacement to the existing driveway there.
That's correct, yes, sir. Yeah, and that's simply because of transitions and queues. You see the yield lines that are here. So what you would want to do is at least leave enough room for a trailer vehicle to be in that queue outside of that driveway entrance. And then from there, I keep doing that. From there, you would then transition down to the adjacent property. Further down, it's less of a transition just because the slope is coming down. So we will have to work with, I was literally just discussing it with them just a few minutes ago, on ensuring that that radius through there is adequate for that adjacent landowner to make sure that he's not seeing that as an obstruction to his point of access into the roadway.
So, and, in the scope of this proposed project, I understand that's what this currently is, but, would those impacts be less if the project was less?
What do you think, less?
Would there be less impacts or potential impacts if it weren't a project of this magnitude?
Tell me what I'm discussing before I can give you an answer.
A lesser impact project, but not a cast-in-place concrete bridge. Not to this scope of the pavement and the amenities that are not there today?
So what I would suggest is that I don't know how to go to any lesser extent than a single lane bridge with minimal shoulders and vertical sides. So to say, is there something less, less surface than what's there today? The approaches, the transitions are all as tight as you can get them based on design standards. They weren't maximized, which would be much softer and gentler, because we know that we're basically threading the eye of the needle, because you have properties on both sides, limited width of access. You literally have to get to that point, maneuver safely, only the minimum design standard, around that curve, and then align back onto a right-of-way, which if, let me see if I can get to it. There's one of these other ones. This one, you can see the edge of that road literally gets right there adjacent to an existing fence. So I walked down there a couple weeks back, I think it was, with the surveyors, and we went through trying to delineate maintained areas relative to rights of way that were per the plat, as well as infrastructure such as fencing and stuff that was there, to make sure that we were trying to piece it as less intrusive as possible to make it fit through there, and that's what this rendering depicts.
And so obviously with the vehicle that's sitting on this proposed structure, that carries it to it, and that's why I'm asking a question about a project of lesser impact. So today, that is a pedestrian bridge. It's not allowed for vehicle traffic. That's why I'm saying a bridge with less capacity, which would be a lesser scope, and would also be equivalent to what's in place today. It's a pedestrian bridge. There's no vehicle traffic of any kind allowed on that.
Understood. It may be a pedestrian bridge because of structural capacity, but it is a vehicle bridge relative to its width.
Right, but if we maintain the width and it doesn't have the structural fortitude, then it can be a pedestrian bridge still at the same width.
So if
Across the crossing.
you're not going to get this funding to put in a pedestrian bridge. If that's the elephant in the room, let's go ahead and say it. We're not going to.
That's fine. So then is there the potential to seek out other options for funding?
Sure, you could always use local funds to replace it with a pedestrian bridge, but you're not going to get a project that is going to consider replacing an existing vehicular bridge that's structurally deficient using this type of funding and put something less than a structurally adequate vehicular bridge.
I see. And what would the time frame be in understanding the availability of those options?
Aside from us having waited nearly 6 years for this, I have no, if we were to try to do it under SCOP program, because that's the only one that I can think of that may have the latitude of doing that, and I don't know that they would do it solely as a pedestrian bridge that doesn't have ancillary roadway components to it. But even that, work programs are 5 years. So everything we put on a priority is a 5-year look ahead.
So understanding that in the current condition of the walking bridge that's there today, which is what's allowed, is that bridge of the condition to get to that potential for other possible options? Can the bridge that's there continue in that condition if it takes 4 to 5 years for replacement?
So using your analogy of the crystal ball that you mentioned earlier.
No, I'm trying to pull that out. I mean, and would that call for another inspection or other inspections to continue to maintain safety?
So what we do know is the condition of the bridge at the last time it was inspected.
Right.
What we don't know is the condition of that bridge today. Obviously, if it had decay at that point and it was a progressive decay, that decay will continue to some extent. Whether it's linear, whether it's exponential, I have no idea. Will DOT subsequently go down there and inspect a closed bridge? They're not supposed to. Once it's closed, it's ours. You know, because at that point, they have moved to the next stage. The next stage is replacing it. And that's where we're at today. So what you're suggesting is the liability of allowing that to remain open resides with you guys.
Doesn't it always reside there anyway?
That's why we closed it, sir.
Indeed, but you still have the continued liability, even with it being closed. If the county owns or maintains that, Mr. Bishop, well, wouldn't the county be named in a potential litigation?
Well, you could be, but that doesn't mean you're gonna lose. Plus the fact that, there's a lot of, talk in the legislature about changing tort law, in Florida, it used to be years and years and years ago, when I first started, there was, say for instance, I ran into the back of you, but you were turning left and didn't give a signal, okay? And you sued me for running in the back of you, and I said, uh-oh, Michael was negligence in that. It was a complete bar. But then as times change, we have what we call comparable negligence. And say it was 90% negligent and you were 10%, you go in front of a jury and I get, you get what you got from me by the jury by less 10% of the whole. Does it make sense?
So it's a reduced responsibility?
Right, well, reduced percentage. Now, that's the law now. But the legislature's meeting and they're talking about 50-50. So that could reduce what you would get for me running back into you. And so, of course, we would, the board would be in that situation if the board was sued, as a practical matter, as somebody injured themselves on the bridge and we were negligent, we might claim that they assumed the risk going on a bridge that had, bad boards, for lack of a better term. That's all I'm saying. So, again, it's a kind of a tit for a tat type thing. The law is constantly changing due to, number one, the legislature changing the law or courts of appeals changing the law. To wit, we all know about the abortion issue. It's changed dramatically, and there's a bill in front of the legislature. And there's rumblings of all kinds of change, and so we're constantly changing. And it used to say that the changes in law was 20 years behind what the people wanted, but it's getting less than that now. In my view, that's just my view.
So it seems like in that view, there wouldn't be any more or less liability in respect to the bridge.
There might be less.
So certainly worth the consideration.
I think he was saying less are at fault in the instance of an incident.
Yeah.
That's what I understood.
Yeah, less.
Plus,
M-O-N-E-Y.
and we have done our diligence with putting up means to preclude that non-pedestrian access.
Vehicles.
I said non-pedestrian, anything non-people.
Okay. So including drones or anything else that's not a pedestrian, I guess. That's
Drone
okay.
would be over the bridge, not on the bridge.
I understand. That's, I guess, up for a counselor's interpretation. Okay, so understanding that, it would appear then, what we're looking at and the considerations vary from a multitude of respects, other than the proposal at this point being just that, and not any further, I suppose, in respect to acquisitions or things of that nature. None of those processes, I guess, have started.
Go ahead. The process has started, but not to the point where offers have been made.
I see. So, I mean, I guess you folks understand how much square footage you would need and the potential amount of what those purchases or offers could be?
So the potential amount, no. When it gets further in design, we'll get the true footage. We have an estimate based upon the concept you see there. The concept's not based upon full design yet. When design really gets underway and really starts narrowing down those widths and lengths and curves that don't need is when, you know, the true right-of-way process will begin.
I see.
I'll hold on to questions. I think there are a few folks from the public.
So this one is,
I see the weather.
yeah, this one is, the yellow areas are their initial concept, estimations of those areas that they intend to or expect to have right-of-way acquisition issues.
It gives us a good generalization, and when design gets underway, they'll be able to narrow down what those true distances and offsets are.
I have an answer to one of your questions.
Hold on one second. Anyone else got any?
Hear from them.
Yes, yeah, I want to read the letters first. So, we appreciate you guys. You have letters that,
Yes.
we're gonna read?
You ready for me to step up or read?
Yeah, well, if you'd rather sit down and read them, that's okay.
Well, I just didn't know if everyone could hear, if I read from here.
They want to wait.
Gail.
Taller than the other one.
We're gonna read some letters right here.
Okay, the first email is from Mr. Michael Woodruff. Dear Commissioners, first, I would like to thank you for your public service and efforts to better our community and county. I am Michael Woodruff, located at 305 Granger Drive, where I purchased my home in 2005. I would like to comment and hopefully clarify some statements that I heard regarding the water levels in the canal. My house is located at the end of the canal that happens to have several springs that feed the canal along with the tides. Based on the last 20 years, I would describe the canal as having enough water, probably 95% of the time during the year, to navigate a 25-foot boat. However, the wood bridge prohibits boat access to the river. I am in favor of a bridge that would allow boat access for canal owners or removing the bridge entirely. Thank you for your time and work on this matter. Respectfully, Michael Woodruff. Okay, the second letter is from Mike and Stacy Whitaker. Hi, we are Mike and Stacy Whitaker, and we have a house on 324 Peninsula Road. We want to first thank you for all the hard work you did to secure the grant for the new Granger Bridge. It would be a great improvement to our community to allow all of the residents on the canal, which are 29 property owners, safer access to the river. I understand there are a few people who oppose the bridge. Those are also the same people in the news article from 2019 that asked for a new bridge when Taylor County was going to remove it. We are not in favor of forming an HOA or deeding the bridge to a resident so they can have complete control of it. This would cause problems in the future and create financial demands on residents. We are willing to compromise and take the bridge out, as it has been condemned for over 3 years and it is not safe to either go over or under it. Removal of the bridge will also have the least impact to the environment and taxpayers' money, as some residents have voiced their concern over. Again, we appreciate the hard work you have put into trying to help our community. The next letter is from Harold and Melody Thomas. Taylor County Commissioners, we are homeowners at 322 Granger Road, Riverside, and this property has been in our family since 1989. It has come to our attention that there are several people opposing the new bridge. We see nothing wrong with this project, as it would better the community and allow safer access for the residents on the canal. It has also come to our attention that several residents are trying to form an HOA or deed the bridge into their name so they can gain control of it. We do not want the community to have this financial responsibility and liability for the future. The simplest and lowest cost solution is to remove the bridge as it has been condemned for over 3 years. This still allows everyone to access their property, eliminate the unsafe bridge, and the canal residents will gain safer water access. Thank you for taking the time to listen to our concerns. The next letter is from Edith Cooey, 309 Peninsula Road Southeast, Steinhatchee, Florida. Dear Commissioners, I would like to address the situation with the Granger Bridge. I live on the canal. We greatly support the installation of a new bridge or simply removing it. We frequently use our small skiff to navigate the canal out to the river. The bridge has been a hazard to the community due to its dilapidated structure and low design. We do not want a homeowners association. This would potentially have a great financial impact on all of the community in the future, leaving us open to different financial obligations and restrictions on our properties. This is not necessary due to the grant money awarded to the county to have DOT build a new bridge. As a native of Steinhatchee, I know that this town was not built on rules and regulations. It saddens me that several of our neighbors do not see the benefit of this project to the whole community and are only thinking of themselves. We are all neighbors and friends. These waterways are a gift to all of us from God. Thank you for your efforts in trying to help our community. Sincerely, Edith Cooey. The next letter is from Dan and Sarah Rich, 318 Granger Road, Steinhatchee, Florida. Dear Taylor County Commissioners, we are aware of a grant that was received for the construction of the new bridge. We would rather just see the old bridge removed as it has been deemed unsafe and closed for 4 years. It is not necessary and we do not want to see an HOA formed or any individuals taking ownership of the bridge. We have owned our house on the Steinhatchee River since 1988. Simply removing the old bridge would preserve the natural beauty of the community and have no environmental impact to the area. Sincerely, Dan and Sarah Rich. Next is a letter from Wayne and Nancy Thomas, 316 Granger Drive, Steinhatchee, Florida. Dear County Commissioners, we are writing this letter to voice our concerns regarding the Granger Drive Bridge. It has come to our attention that a couple of our neighbors want to form an HOA or LLC to fund the bridge and maintain it. We are not in favor of this action. We have been told that the DOT has acquired a grant to rebuild the bridge so our neighbors on the canal would have better access to the main river. We would like to see the bridge built higher for this purpose or remove it altogether and put barricades up. We have 4 generations of family who come throughout the year to enjoy the beauty and peacefulness of Steinhatchee. We are in our 80s now and plan to pass it down to family to be used for many years to come. We do not want to pass down another expense to our family due to an HOA. The cost of maintaining a home near the Gulf plus a seawall and boathouse can be very expensive. We respectfully hope that you will consider our objections in this matter. Sincerely, Wayne and Nancy Thomas. Next is a letter from Art. It is Gilreath. Dear Taylor County Commissioners, as a property owner on Peninsula Road and having access to the canal, I support the construction of the new bridge or complete removal of the bridge on Granger Drive. As commissioners, you fought hard for this grant so a new structurally sound bridge could be constructed for the community. We are more than grateful for your efforts in pursuing this and being awarded the grant. I am now aware that there are some who oppose this and want to form an HOA to control the bridge themselves. I am strongly against this. Taylor County and the DOT should maintain control of this bridge. Sincerely, Art Gilreath. Next letter is from Joe Johnson. Dear Taylor County Commissioners, once again, I am writing to you in support of the grant to replace the condemned bridge on Granger Road. In its current state, the bridge is hazardous and the FDO plan would rectify this problem. Also, an HOA to fund the bridge is totally absurd, especially when there is a grant. I believe that the general consensus among everyone, either for or against the bridge, is that a compromise would be to tear the down the bridge and have no bridge. Thank you for your time, Joe Johnson. Next, from Kelly and Pamela Kuhn. Dear County Commissioners, we are one half of the owners of 313 Peninsula Drive. It has come to our attention that a property owner near the end of the canal just past the bridge in question wishes to put the bridge in an LLC and form an HOA. Allowing a public thoroughfare to be controlled by an LLC is not only a terrible idea, but shuts out any meaningful input by residents of the neighboring properties. We bought the lot with the property on Peninsula knowing that a new bridge was coming and in turn would benefit those owners and users of the canal with access to the river by a small boat traffic. By allowing one or two to have control over access to the river sets a bad precedent and does not serve the needs and wishes of the majority, but the wishes of the few. The grant to replace the bridge is an asset for the community of Steinhatchee and should be valued and used as awarded. How many more grants will be awarded if they are not used? Next is from Pamela Kuhn. My husband Kelly Kuhn sent an email on behalf of both of us, and we strongly oppose the county allowing the bridge to put it into an LLC or HOA. We feel that this will hurt our property values if the bridge is not torn down or replaced. It would make the most sense to use the grant for the intent it was applied for. Thank you again for your time. Next, from Melissa Johnson. To whom it may concern, in August 2022, my family and I purchased a lot on Peninsula Drive off of Granger Drive. We had searched for almost 2 years for the perfect lot for a vacation spot, but also as an investment property. We are so excited to find this location, and as we are avid kayakers and anglers. We love that this lot has access to the Steinhatchee River. Since purchasing the property, we have kayaked from our property to the river several times. To access the river, we kayak under the Granger Bridge. Due to the low clearance of the bridge, we have to crouch down under the bridge. My family and I were very excited to hear about the grant that was received to remove the existing bridge and to build a newer, bigger one. Not only would a bigger bridge allow easier access to the river, it would also increase our property value and attract potential renters, which helps tourism in Steinhatchee. The thought of the existing bridge being made smaller and privately owned is very disheartening to my family and I. When we purchased the property, we dreamed of many days kayaking to the river. A smaller, privately owned bridge would completely take away that dream. We would like for you to continue to consider the original plan of building a bigger bridge or not replacing it all. Thank you for your time and consideration, Melissa Johnson. Next is from Sean Johnson. My property is on 313 Peninsula Drive. I recently purchased cleared land and now adding sewer, water, and electricity. When I bought it, I was hoping the Granger Bridge would be rebuilt in the future. I recently read the proposal for the new bridge and was very excited. Getting a kayak with small kids under this bridge is quite dangerous. Forget driving even a small boat under it. Almost a month later, I hear from the grapevine that a single person is trying to stop the build for their own reasons. I'm confused about what is actually going on. I have not been officially notified of this proposal. I hear that an LLC or HOA is what this one person is proposing. I do not know how this would work, and I'm not interested. Let's keep the original plan and/or take the bridge down. From what I hear, it's a hazard anyway. Thank you for letting me and my family express our opinion. Sean Johnson. Next is from Mike and Stacy Whitaker.
Yes, ma'am.
Did I read Mike and Stacy Whitaker? Okay, thank you. Next is from John and Marty Allen. Good afternoon. We are following up regarding Granger Bridge. We have received information that there is a proposal of forming an LLC or HOA to take over control of the bridge. We are not in favor of this proposal. We are in support of taking the bridge down or raising the bridge. We own property on the canal on Peninsula Road and would like to be able to access it by the river by boat. This is something we can only do on low tide currently due to the height of the bridge. When we bought it in 2019, we were told by the Realtor that the bridge would be rebuilt, raised, or removed. It is our understanding that the funds are available. Respectfully, John and Marty Allen. Next is from Sean Johnson. I think I already read that one.
You already read one from there.
Okay. And Melissa Johnson.
Let's go down.
I don't know why I have multiple. Okay. Okay. Mr. John, would you like to read your email or do you want me to read it for you?
You can read it.
Okay. Okay, and the last email is from John Dickert. Dear friends, it's from John and Gail, right? For both of y'all, okay. Dear friends, John and I thank you for hearing our deep concerns, re our beloved Granger Bridge. We pray all dedicated board members will help ensure our wood bridge is protected and improved for the enjoyment of all Steinhatchee residents who enjoy daily walks over our beloved wood bridge located within beautiful woodlands, which also deserve our protection. Our home on Granger was built by John's father over 60 years ago on a little piece of land he bought from Mr. Granger, who developed Granger subdivision. Folks on Granger, indeed, our whole Steinhatchee community has stood strong each time a few tried to have our beloved little Granger wood bridge torn out, as this beautifully designed and strongly constructed bridge with its huge undergirding timbers fits perfectly into one of Florida's most beloved walking trails, which many in Steinhatchee traverse daily. And despite all this board's recent changes to that little bridge, it's still loved and used daily now as a walking bridge. When your board turned it into a pedestrian golf cart bridge, we discovered we loved it even more, as did our community. Granger residents have benefited by less truck traffic, fewer thefts, less dust, and our small Granger neighborhood is more peaceful until FDOT suddenly appeared to unveil a ridiculously tall cement bridge plan. Obviously, FDOT didn't do their research, as our shallow, short Granger Canal, which abruptly ends at Granger Road, is tidal, meaning twice daily the tide comes in, then goes out, which is why one rarely sees big boats in narrow Granger Canal, unless it's docked at a home on either end of that little canal, as it is impossible for big boats to exit that very shallow tidal canal at low tide, which occurs twice daily and is a strong factor FDOT failed to take into consideration while spending loads of taxpayer money designing a tall bridge, which may be a good fit someplace but not in our neighborhood. Mr. Granger dug his little drainage canal, which works well to prevent excess flooding during frequent storms and extremely high tides. But his little canal was never ever intended to be a tall boat thoroughfare. And if FDOT officials had spent 1 hour talking with folks on Granger, or if our VOCC had held a hearing for FDOT to present their ideas with Granger residents, some of whom have designed bridges, I doubt FDOT would have proposed building a preposterously tall bridge, which would require tree removal and disrupt the lives of elderly residents who live by the bridge, while blocking some homes for a year or more. Why, we all wonder, were Granger residents not allowed input earlier, before so much money was wasted on a poor design? If you met our elderly neighbors who live beside our wood bridge, you'd see some are disabled, yet they're still able to enjoy little daily walks across our small wood bridge they love. To rip out our neighborhood's beloved little wood bridge and replace it with a tall cement bridge many could not traverse uphill would be a terrible idea. I'm sure you'll all agree. There are a million other reasons FDOT's design is wrong for our beautiful natural wetlands, but I have neither time nor space to list them all here. But I am sure others will clarify them at tonight's hearing, which to us is a hearing to save our beloved little wood bridge so it can be stabilized and safely utilized as a safe pedestrian golf cart bridge. There are excellent examples of wonderful woodland walking bridges on trails all over North Florida, which we hope our county engineer and commissioners will visit prior to final restoration of Granger Bridge. The slight curve on Granger Bridge is perfect for walkers of all ages to traverse. Raising the bridge any higher or increasing its curve would just make it harder for neighbors with disabilities to traverse. So please hear our concerns and allow us to participate in any future decisions or changes to our beloved Granger Bridge and to our neighborhood. Don't let Granger residents be the last to know what's being planned for our own neighborhood, please. It is deeply troubling when actions are taken in our neighborhood without our knowledge nor consent. My engineer husband, John, quietly observed and felt good about the nice restoration work our own county engineer and his hardworking team were accomplishing on Granger Bridge until they were suddenly stopped. But now, with your good decision-making, we hope our county crew will be allowed to finally complete the good work they began. And we join our Granger neighbors in hoping that work in strengthening our little walking bridge will commence very soon. John and I thank you for your hard work, for hearing our deep concerns, and most of all, for acting in the best interest of those most affected by your decisions. Sincerely, Gail and John.
We have quite a few callers, but no one has raised their hand.
Is that all of our letters
Yes, sir.
and no callers?
We have
Hello.
callers, but they haven't raised their hands
No
to
one
speak.
speak? Okay.
Can you announce again the instructions if they wish to speak, just to make sure they understand?
Yeah, sort of, folks on the line, if anyone, wishes to speak, just dial *5, and the moderator's gonna unmute your line when it's your turn to speak, and notify you by announcing the last 4 digits of your telephone number. When you hear your number announced, just please announce your name and address, and you'll be allowed to speak for 3 minutes.
So caller 0220.
Caller 0220.
This is Jerry Granger. My address is 50 Wyandotte Road, Highlands, North Carolina. And our family owns a substantial number of lots in Granger subdivision, and I guess I'm the spokesperson. Mike Whitaker contacted me and asked that I call in, and I'd just like to say that we are, all of us, as a group, and I believe we own 10 or 11 lots, and some of us own individual lots in Granger subdivision. We are all for removing the bridge and or raising the bridge. Anything that would give us more access to the water. And that's our point of view.
Thank you.
Only one.
All right.
Yes.
Okay. All right, we'll move on to citizens here, like to speak. You can step forward.
Good evening, Taylor County Commission. My name is Chuck Berger. I'd like to thank you for all serving as elected officials. As a previous two-term commissioner, I know the difficulties and challenges you often face. I am here today to speak about the Granger Bridge. For the past 9 years, I have owned lots 12 and 13 on Peninsula Drive. We recently attended a meeting at the community center to learn more about the bridge proposal. Many of us believe that the DOT has a great plan for a modern, updated bridge. Conversely, there is another group of people who are resistant to change and wish to leave the current bridge as is, in place. There are several petitions currently circulating. Many signatures are people who will never even cross the bridge in question. There's also a discussion of creating an HOA that would allow for the Granger area to maintain a golf cart and walking bridge. A lot of area homeowners do not wish to see this happen. Not only could this cause a burden, potential liability, and it would also limit the potential of the bridge. There is no denying or dispute that the current bridge is decaying and will continue to do at a rapid pace. The current bridge in its present state will cost Taylor County citizens exorbitant maintenance costs, in addition to posing a threat or danger. What will happen should the bridge fail harm, or kill someone. I and many others believe that this grant is a wonderful opportunity for our rural community. A new bridge will require little to no maintenance for many years. It will provide a reliable and dependable route for emergency evacuation, fire escape, and access for 911. The bridge improvement has the potential to increase property taxes. We all know, but this will potentially increase the tax revenue for Taylor County, helping with roads, infrastructure, and other needs of this wonderful community. I and many others believe we need to accept the grant for the bridge. As a Taylor County landowner, I believe the right thing to do is upgrade the bridge now, which will create additional benefits in the future. We also got to remember DOT inspects all bridges every 2 years. This will mean there's a good chance that we will be failing inspection and costing the taxpayers money. We are not bridge builders. Let's leave it to the professionals. Thank you. Charles Chuckberger.
Anyone else?
Greetings. My name is Art Gilreath. My wife and I own lot 309 and 307 on Peninsula Drive. We've had that lot since 2000, and those lots since 2008. What I'd like to do is, if I can, summarize some of the issues and options that have been rumored to surface. Eliminating the existing wood bridge. What are some of the values or justifications for doing that? Well, obviously, it's the cheapest option. If we're worried about spending government money, that would be the cheapest option, just move it, take it out of there. There's less environmental impact. It's certainly the fastest to do it next week. It eliminates an unsafe bridge. It opens safe canal access to the river. There's been some concern about increased auto traffic if we have a new bridge. Well, this would eliminate auto traffic, or certainly reduce auto traffic like it is now, because you wouldn't have a bridge to run around. And there's less threat of increased crime. That's been expressed as a concern. Having a new bridge, or crime would increase. Well, if you don't have a bridge, obviously that would reduce the potential for increased crime. And there's probably some other advantages and disadvantages of tearing down the bridge, but those are some of the justifications. If we do the department, FDOT's proposed new bridge, it provides a safe bridge with modern design. It provides a multiple emergency vehicle access. I was recently witness to a terrible tragedy on Granger Drive where a truck caught on fire and an individual died with his dog. And being one of the first ones on the scene, I was there when all the emergency vehicles accessed the scene, and I happened to notice that the fire truck was the first truck that got there. And then I got to thinking, if there was another fire, if there was a fire emergency and that fire truck had to get out of there, all of these other vehicles, the county sheriff, two or three other detective trucks and those type things would have had to all back up, wasting precious moments to allow that fire truck to get back out of that road and go to one access. If we had a bridge, he would have an alternative to go forward and get to where he needed to go. Now, the problem with no change, and you've discussed this, that would possibly or potentially provide a high liability responsibility for the county. If there were, now maybe not someone running into the back of a car, but maybe somebody falling off the bridge or falling through a bridge due to further deterioration. There would be continuing deterioration of the bridge. It would obviously be a higher maintenance than any of the other options. And there would be lack of clear ownership of the bridge, especially if there's an HOA or the LLC that's been mentioned before. There would be unsafe operating condition of the bridge. There would be unsafe and limited canal access to the river through the canal. Now, I know you've seen a chart that shows all of the folks that are opposed to the bridge. I took the liberty of contacting as many members.
Sir, if we can go ahead and start wrapping up, we get 3 minutes, and just kind of get.
Can I show this to you guys, and I'll push? The yellow part there is the folks that are either for a new bridge or taking down the existing bridge. And you'll notice the biggest yellow spots here and over here relate to Mrs. Granger's comments a few minutes ago. That the Granger descendants are for either building the new bridge that the FDOT is proposing or tearing down the bridge, not leaving it like it is. So I just wanted to let you see the number of folks in contrast that are for it as opposed to against it. Okay, thank you very much.
Anyone else? Yeah.
All right, y'all heard Mike Williams, y'all know, live on Granger Drive. Well, I'm gonna answer some of your questions right off. How much, land are we gonna have to purchase? Point, according to the state, this technical bulletin I give you, that was the environmental impact study, we're gonna have to purchase 0.145 acres of wetlands. It's on page 22. It's also on page 18. That's approximately $80,000 that the county's gonna have to come up with. And I want you to look at if you can flip that back to the wooden bridge that we have.
Just roll the mouse. There you go.
Yeah, look at that. Look at the,
Go back. Yeah.
The back.
Go ahead. Go ahead. The other way. The other way. Roll it down. Roll it again. No,
you just passed it.
one more. Go back the other direction. Only
Anyway.
two slides. Stay there.
All right, we got that little wood bridge right there. And it's in a neighborhood. This is not a major thoroughfare, y'all. This is a neighborhood. Flip it to the one that's in Miami or where that other one's at. Just the next one. They're gonna replace that with that. And the people that are here and those letters you got, they're all in the center section. Most of them are on Peninsula Way. They're not on Granger. They want the bridge gone, what they want.
No, we don't.
If you want that,
We want a new one.
I think the bridge is awesome. I think it's
Us,
great, state of
it's
the art.
if
I need it for 911, you know.
you don't live down there. You don't live on Granger.
I know where I live.
We live on Peninsula, right in the middle.
Granger Circle. The people that he's talking about, that are for the bridge or taking it out, there's a handful of them. I got 350 signatures on this petition that don't want it. And if we did build a big bridge, we don't need that massive structure. We need a small bridge if y'all decide that's what y'all want to go. That's pretty much it. Mike, I've talked to you a couple times, I've talked to some of the other things. I don't want to see that kind of money spent. It's all our money. We shouldn't spend that kind of money on a project with a few people. It's crazy. Let's try to get that money moved over to Tibby Bridge, where there's people that are really in danger down there, because you can't get fire truck into them.
Thanks, sir.
Jim Zerber, from Steenhatchee, Florida. I'm always amazed when I've been in Steenhatchee a long time. I came because we didn't have the wonderful new bridge looking like something in Biscayne Bay, Fort Myers, Englewood, Bowden Grand. Came here because it was Taylor County. I came here and made my choice back in 1978. And I can appreciate the comments that people would like to have water access. Okay? So if one gentleman said, take the bridge out, and people can get their water access. But we're gonna get that thing dredged because they wanna put the new bridge in. If we only take the bridge out, I'm not sure there's a dredging component to give you deeper water more often to get a bigger boat out. So that's something you have to think about if we did take the bridge out. When I go down Granger, it's Lime Rock Road. Even I got shades, right? It's a Lime Rock Road. It's narrow. It just doesn't fit a bridge like this. There are plenty of places, possibly in Taylor County, that this could fit. But when I look at it, and I can see that people on Peninsula, they want water access. This will give it to them. Hire a bridge or take the bridge out. And if I'm an engineer, that's a beautiful project. And so you know how engineers are. They're like an accountant. They use a pencil. I mean, they want the nicest looking something that people say, hey, I worked on that project. But this is going to be a tough decision. I'm sure you guys, when we get forward to a vote, and I don't live there, so all I can say is that I think the will of the people and the fact that the money's free, it's really not free. This is like a welfare handout. That infrastructure bill was a vote buying propaganda as far as I was concerned. They're throwing money at projects that make no sense if you really do the research all over this country. And I think this is possibly one of those. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Anyone else?
My name is Brenda Berger. I live in Peninsula. We've been there 9 years. Some of these people that have spoken, Mike, they are on the outside of the canal. We're the ones inside the canal. He's got all the waterway he wants. So it's a couple other ones. It's us that would like that to come up. And in this century, things have changed. Things are going to change. And I think it's time to build a good bridge and do what you taught when you, was it 20? You talked to the DOT and told them just what you wanted. And now they're putting it before you. Don't spit in their face and take it away. That's what y'all gonna do if you don't take the grant. Thank you.
I can understand all sides of this. We all just want to keep a beautiful place that we're losing our environment in so many places in Florida. We went down there originally, John's father did, because it was so beautiful. Because it was wild and beautiful. You know, people have moved in and they're cutting into the wetlands. And I'm not sure that the people who are supposed to protect our wetlands know all the devastation that's taking place. I'm not opposing having, it would be terrible to take that out completely, so you can't do that walk. It's a mile walk through beautiful, beautiful woods. And I used to go down, and I've been through terrible tragedies in my life. It was a place where I and a lot of other people found wonderful peace in nature. I'm not opposed to having a bridge of some sort there. It just does, it is a tidal canal, and despite what anyone says, when tide goes out, there's a whole lot less water. People would get stuck out there unless you dredge it. I asked the people from DOT if they were interested in dredging the canal, and this gentleman back here said no. And so it's a lot of expense. I understand everyone's point of view. I think everyone has the right to enjoy the wilderness. I just don't think we should destroy the wilderness so that there is no wilderness for people to go to. And more, we're losing what is beautiful, and I just think it should be, if some thought should go into its protection. We've gone all over this region, when St. Mark's recently, they have beautiful, beautiful little walking bridges. I'm giving you all, John made some pictures. There are beautiful things you can do. It doesn't have to look like Miami, which is what that thing that was shown up here looks. I appreciate, the young engineer here and the work that he's done. They did beautiful. People talk about that being a decrepit bridge. It is in their timbers. I think they're 12 by 12. So I don't know. John had them, their family they used to do a lot of sawing of lumber. I think he said those were 12 by 12s holding up the bridge. If you go look at that bridge, it's a very strong bridge. And so that's not true, that it's falling apart or decrepit or anything, it isn't. And something that could be done with it, but one thing I do not want to, and all those people who didn't know this was gonna be a major discussion on whether to keep it or not tonight, they'd be here because we were far in the majority when it was held at the community center. There were only 3 people who spoke out, for people comparing it out. The whole rest of the building, I mean, there were engineers and people who built bridges who were there speaking up to keep a nice, do something beautiful there. I trust you guys. I think you're gonna do a good job. You're appreciated. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else? Anyone raised on the line to speak? Anyone on the board?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. 3 years ago, they came to us pleading to replace that bridge. They came with pictures and they came armed pretty well, almost demanding that we replace that bridge. So we spent considerable time, energy, and money to make that happen. We've been awarded $3 million to replace that bridge. Now, some of them are coming and they're saying they don't want the bridge as designed. They want a different bridge. 3 years ago, when they came to us, we heard a lot about safety, evacuation, emergency services, but now I'm not hearing that from these people that came 3 years ago wanting the bridge. Instead, we're hearing about the environment. We're hearing about manatees, and I talked with one person that lives down there, and he said he's been there 20 years, he's never seen the first manatee. So they're saying that they don't want the bridge as designed. They don't want it tore down and left that way, but they want an adorable little wooden bridge that they can walk over. I've talked to quite a few people, and we've heard tonight from quite a few people, and a lot of people that called in that have property or live in that area, and they don't want an HOA or an LLC. They don't want a cute little wooden bridge. What they do want, what they've said, and we've heard tonight, is they want us to build a bridge as designed, as currently designed, or tear it down and don't replace it. The majority of the people that I've heard from, that is what they've said, and the majority of the people here tonight have said that. I went down yesterday just for myself to take another look at that bridge, and I had been before, but I wanted to see it again. It's been mentioned that people like to walk across the bridge. Well, I looked at walking across it yesterday, and I didn't feel real comfortable walking across that bridge. It's also been mentioned to me, and I've got a lot of calls, that people want to be able to get their boats in and out. That's important to them. So I'd like to say this. If the bridge is tore down and not replaced, the people that want to walk still have the same opportunity to walk. They can walk up to that point, they can turn around, and there's plenty of places to walk. I saw that yesterday. So tearing down that bridge, if we don't replace it, would not inhibit people from walking. But I'll tell you one thing, if we put up a cute little wooden bridge, those people that want to get their boats in and out would not be able to get their boats in and out. And I suspect that a lot of the reason people move down there, and that's why some of us that have places on the coast, we want to fish, we want to be able to get our boats in and out. When I was there yesterday, it looked like a lot of water in that canal. So when the tide goes down, it may be a little difficult. Where we are at the beach, when the tide is out and low, it's a little bit difficult to get under the bridge, but we know to wait when it's, the tide is right. So, where I am with this, I would say we either tear that bridge down and don't replace it, or we tear it down and we follow the design that has been presented to us. When our staff has worked long and hard to get this kind of money, I hate to think that their time was wasted. And if we don't take that $3 million, I can tell you right now, some other community will. If you think back a few years ago when state of Florida could have had a high-speed rail, but it was turned down, or there were, I don't know how many communities waiting for that. It's not free money, but somebody's gonna spend it. So if it's been offered to us and we decide to rebuild that bridge as designed, that's what we should do. Or tear it down and don't worry about it. We can block it off, but I'm more inclined to say build the bridge as designed. Can it be tall enough for boats to go in and out, right?
We included a 6-foot clearance at high tide.
Yeah, so these people can still get their boats in and out. The people that like to walk, they can still walk. They're not inhibited from walking. So, that's where I stand. Either build it or tear it down and don't replace it. And I'm more inclined to build it since we worked hard for that $3 million. And it would provide a safer atmosphere. But I'm not in favor of building a cute little walking bridge.
Anyone else on the board?
I have several things to say in respect to this project, and the first one is, as it's proposed, it's $3 million. Is that correct, gentlemen? That's the proposed cost?
That's the overall budget.
That's the overall total.
And that, for this one bridge, is more than the total project as proposed for First Avenue. Is that fair, Mr. Dudley? This proposal for the cost of this one structure is greater at cost than the entire First Avenue project.
It's greater than the amount that was funded.
Yes, sir.
But I don't think it's gonna be greater than the cost of
And I wouldn't ask you to
finish.
propose a project price that we don't know, but just as fair in your statement, we don't know that it's gonna come in at $3 million for the expense in total if this project proceeds. Is that fair? Could those costs be higher?
So you're asking me, would First Avenue be more expensive if this is built first?
No, sir. I'm asking you, just as fair as your statement is that First Avenue may be more expensive when we get to that point, I believe this project will be more expensive because of the way the inflationary costs are and let's say the consideration for unforeseen costs as they were when this proposal was brought forward.
Understood. The construction cost component of this one, if I remember, was 1.8.
Right. But it's not just construction that we're talking about. So what I'm saying is, as fair as it is to consider that First Avenue may cost more money than what the budgeted amount is, we can say that's probably a very reasonable statement. We can also say that this proposed project could also reach higher costs than the proposal.
Okay, I understand your question. So two parts, obviously. First Avenue will cost more than 1.8 million.
Okay.
The second part of it, yes, costs today for construction and infrastructure do not seem to be going down. So any time between now and sometime in the future,
sure,
it is very reasonable to expect that cost for any infrastructure related component will cost more.
And that's the reason for my assumption in saying this is a proposed cost of $3 million. First Avenue is the proposed cost, it is, but we understand that we would be safe in making an assumption that both those costs are very likely to be higher than what's proposed.
And there is one difference in here. This is a federal delivery. So right now we are getting a bridge. No local dollars.
Sure.
First Avenue was a SCOP program. Whereas if the costs come in beyond that,
Yes, sir.
that's our responsibility.
And aren't all of those dollars, revenues from taxpayers, federal, state, or local, aren't they all taxpayer dollars that fund these projects?
Rhetorical question, correct?
No, sir. Aren't they all taxpayer dollars?
Every dollar that comes to us, either from the state or the federal government, is the source from a taxpayer citizen. Yes, sir.
That's correct. So that's why, in my view of this particular project, I mean, I see what's proposed, and I'm not doubting the quality of what's proposed, and, you have my respect for that, but I'm also considering this magnitude of a project in a residential neighborhood. And I'm also having to consider, and while I don't try to discriminate one way, shape, or form, it looks like that there's the potential in two respects to put forth a vehicle traffic type bridge, and to also try to reach out for the possible use for the waterway. And I don't see that being a problem, except for I don't know that the taxpayers are responsible to finance the use or potential use of that particular waterway, which in the state that it's in may not be at the same level. So that is one of the biggest reasons that I say, while I can appreciate the proposal, I think that there may be a better path to a solution. And so I don't think that it is the taxpayer's responsibility to finance access to basically private property, if we're saying that's by water or road or any other method. So for my understanding here, I would like to see a solution that is more suitable to this residential neighborhood, that doesn't have this magnitude of cost and expense, but that perhaps is just as efficient or effective in respect to its location. So I know we're not going to be taking any action here tonight, Mr. Chairman, but I'm just looking at the proposed project and then trying to see a path forward that is efficient, effective, and suitable for this location.
Just a follow-up comment, and I would hope that it would be understood that Taylor County, as the political subdivision of the state of Florida, in this location, we have a responsibility for providing a safe infrastructure for the general public's usage. This is a benefit that we have with federal bridge replacement programs. It's done that way because they are understanding that some of our local jurisdictions don't have the funding source or the capita to support the costs associated with this type of infrastructure. So these programs are set up to where it provides opportunities for us to have these components of our infrastructure replaced relying on a larger funding source, that being federal dollars. Do I think that's a waste of dollars? No, I don't. This is a responsibility we have to provide a safe, traversable infrastructure. Looking at this community today is not what that community will look like tomorrow. So we realize that the infrastructure that we are doing, even as simple as a road, we don't do I want to build this road to last 1 year. It's a 20-year life cycle on that. Bridges are getting out to 50 years and even more. The bridges that were just replaced on the beach road were 1940s vintage. So we know that when we build stuff and we build it adequately, it provides a resource and the infrastructure for a community that's well beyond our tenure here. So look at this as an opportunity to do something that we have a responsibility for at a cost that doesn't impact our local citizenry at all.
I could certainly respect that position, but I also understand that just because it's a federal funded program that we should not be just as conservative in respect to the product we'd be putting forward. So I'm not here to try to debate or turn into I guess, a shouting match. But what I would say is, from my position, and I appreciate our partners on the federal level and our partners on the state level, and I appreciate the folks that I get to see and interact with on the county level or local level. But I don't see it any different in respect to responsibility and accountability when we're looking at this type of investment. So I'm not here at all to sacrifice any measure of safety, but I'm also not willing to look at safety and put a rubber stamp on this consideration.
And this will be my last response, I promise. And I am not,
I'm gonna write that down.
I'm not typically one to shout, and I don't intend to start doing that. But understand that we sought this money. We asked for it. This board took a position prior, when that bridge was at a point that it became an eligible candidate. We knew that there was a funding source out there that would be something we could get a hold of. We sought it. We got it. We pursued, and we are responding to the requests and desires that were overwhelming at that point in time in 2019. And I'm telling you, I'm sure we're engineers. We're not looking for a memorial here. We are trying to be responsive to the request that was made. And we think we put forward an all-encompassing proposal that addresses everything that was discussed, because I made these guys go back and forth on iteration after iteration till we finally got to this point. It meets all of those original objectives. And all I'm suggesting is that don't look at it as a waste when it was something that we asked for.
Be that as it may, I respect those requests and process and the investment of your time and expertise. But I also respect these directions that are being placed before us currently.
Mr. Pickle?
Yes, you're exactly right, Kenneth. I couldn't have said it better myself. It's not a waste of $3 million. We're responsible for the health, safety, and welfare of our citizens. The bridge was in terrible shape. They brought pictures. They pleaded with us, please build us another bridge. This is not safe. We listened, we responded, and staff has spent untold hours trying to do this, to make this bridge safe. And that's what we want to do. We want to make it safe. And we have to look for the future. And Kenneth, I applaud you for that, because I like to look to the future too, just like when we're talking about other projects in this county. This county is experiencing growth. It's not going to stop. And when we build something, we build it right, we build it to last. You don't have to worry about coming back. When Kenneth designs something, you don't have to worry about coming back. It's going to fall in, it's going to last, and that's what we want. We cannot take talk about spending taxpayer money. We can't take local taxpayers' money and go down there and build a cute little wooden bridge for people to walk over. That's us paying for that on a different level here in Taylor County. We've got the money, we've got the design. Let's build this bridge the way it is proposed to build. You can't, I want to say, I don't see how in the world you could compare this with First Avenue. I mean, we're talking about a bridge. Bridges are more difficult to build than a road, right, Kenneth?
Typically, yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so whatever First Avenue costs, I don't care. We need to build this bridge.
Any other commissioner? Yes, I would follow up with that question, I guess it is. In consideration for how our taxpayer dollars are invested, while it may be difficult for some folks to understand comparison. The comparison is if this roadway was traveled as much as First Avenue, then this would be a very simple consideration. and there really wouldn't be any reason for discussion. So that's the reason for comparison. And I understand your lack of concern for First Avenue. However, First Avenue is the major thoroughfare in Steinhatchee. It's a connector road that I would dare say anyone that visits Steinhatchee will very likely use at some point. So the comparison is the sizable cost of this project in this residential neighborhood in respect to the investment and the cost to the major thoroughfare in Steinhatchee. So for a simplistic comparison, it's the comparison between Granger Drive and this proposed project, Granger Drive Bridge, and First Avenue. So a residential area or a residential roadway that really at this point is not a loop because it stops at this bridge currently, or a major thoroughfare or collector road. That's the reason for the comparison.
Mr. Chair, one more thing. I have to say this. Whether 10,000 people go across the road, the bridge, or whether one person goes across that bridge, we still have an obligation to build that bridge safe and to have a place where emergency vehicles can come in and out. So to me, it doesn't matter if you've got First Avenue with 10,000 cars on it. It's one person or 10,000, it doesn't matter. I can't put a price on a lot. It's all, so, that's all I have to say.
I'd follow up with that. And what I say is, our fire chief is here, and can you tell me, since this was brought up, Chief Castle, how many emergency vehicles have crossed this bridge? And that would be from the time frame that DOT has said that it's closed to vehicle traffic.
It's hard to say, because even beforehand, the old wooden bridge, even when it was open, would not have been rated for fire truck apparatus. So moving forward, and that's what I'd ask, kind of the weight rating was, I would hope that the new bridge is, if it is built, it would give us access to be able to, drive all the way around. Or if there was one problem that may arise that before the bridge or with the current bridge or no bridge, is that there was a mistaken dispatch where we were sent to one side of Granger Drive and not the other. A fire truck would have to back all the way down the road or into a driveway and find a spot to turn around to get to the other side, which could delay. So I would say the bridge could be beneficial to emergency response. On a water supply aspect, if, once again, weight rating of the bridge, if I can park a fire truck on that bridge, I can catch a draft and pull water right out of that creek to support firefighting operations. So there are benefits to public safety to have a bridge there.
Let me ask this question, if I could. You're familiar with the proximity of the Steinhatchee River in this location and canal access, that you already have a supply or source of water, so is that always a necessity? And let me ask this way. In respect to the time frame that this bridge has been closed, are you familiar with any times that you have had any of this type of suggested confusion?
The most recent one would be the vehicle fire in Granger just within the last couple weeks. But now I would say, I believe, going just off of sheer memory, I believe there's one fire hydrant on Granger Drive. But once again, we're talking about capacity of hydrant mains that far away on smaller mains. And compared to trying to draft out of the river, its distance is my issue. Because when we're drafting, usually the longest distance I'm going to be able to get away and pull water out of a source is 20 feet. So if I can't get a fire truck to the rear of a structure, I can't access that water. Versus if I can pull across a bridge, I can drop a hose right off the side. So it gives opportunities that can't otherwise be afforded.
But if I understand that right, so if you park on a bridge, you would be forced to use hose to go to those adjacent neighborhoods, and that's a fair amount of footage away, is that right?
Well, like I said, we would have one fire truck at a house, and then we'd have another one that would be a supply truck.
Right.
So, and like I said, in the one hydrant, if further up the road, like I said, I don't remember exactly how far away from the bridge it is.
Right.
Even in that situation, we're gonna drop hose. Most fires, I mean, that's, a supply line has to be dropped. But where that hydrant may be flowing 800 gallons a minute, you know, conservatively, I can pull up to, you know, I can pull a 1250 GPM pumper on that bridge and flow over well over 1,000 to, you know, 1250 GPMs. So I would possibly have a lot higher capacity.
But you're also making the assumption it's gonna be high tide and you've got a maximum amount of volume at that bridge.
As long as the water, the surface of the water is within 14 feet of my pump, I have a foot of water depth, we can draft that. So even on low tide, unless it's, the mud is showing, I should be able to catch a draft there. So I would say majority of the time, you would have a credible water supply.
Well, in either consideration, if you had access to that canal with your pump truck, you could still use, because the canal parallels the road, and it's not a very far piece in a lot of those locations. So,
but a lot of
comparison for your pump situation, you would still likely have that capacity.
It depends if lots are wooded, it depends if there's homes in the way. Every location, like I said, anytime we're gonna look for the closest possible best option that we have. In Keaton Beach here recently had a large house fire in that area that we squeezed between a house on a driveway and we got as close as we could and we caught a draft there. So if there's a better option, we're always gonna take that. But this is one, like I said, and I'm not a proponent for or against, I'm just, saying that there are benefits. And as far as a fast access without having to look, it would provide us opportunities by having the bridge.
I'd like to say something. You got two sides to this coin. You got a group that wants to have no bridge at all, where they get their boat in and out, and it will increase the value of their property if they ever wanted to sell it, because they got Gulf access with a bigger boat, and I can understand y'all's part too. And then you got the other side that don't want people driving through all the time of day and night with music playing and turning around, coming through their neighborhood. So where I'm at, take the bridge out, put up a barricade at the end, put no turnaround signs at the end of the road where it comes in on both roads, and put dead end signs up where you come in, and that's where I'm at. We take the bridge out, it won't cost us any more money to work on any more bridges, and everybody will be satisfied. The ones will have to be able to drive their boats down the canal, and the other ones will have what they want. They don't want the neighborhood with people coming through all the time. And I can see both sides of it. That's where I'm at.
Just for Saturday night after the wreck between just about 3 miles out of crossing, I was coming from Wilson to bury my brother in Altamont Spring. And when I got to the river, Swanee River, I saw the high patrolman lights flashing, and he was running. When I got to Cross City, both lanes was closed. And the deputy sheriff told me, and evidently he wasn't from Cross City. He said, go back to the light at this Swanee Lumber Company, go over to the next highway, and go over and come out. I came out about 2 miles this side of Brantford. I thought about that when the state come with the roads, and they have these studies, the first thing we do is think, what is it going to do to the local folks? Now, I don't know what a Cat 4 or Cat 5 would do to steam hatchet. But I'm sure if you had a bridge that would connect it from one end to the other, and you can go from one to the other rather than having to go one and turn around and come back, might be a plus for it. The other thing what I've been hearing, when I first heard about the bridge, my heart bled for those folks who wanted that bridge 3 years ago, or 4 years ago when it was up there. I know Mr. Dicker, he meant well when he built that house down there, and Mr. Granger, you know, all of them together. But I do know things won't stay the same. Somebody got to move in. If it stay the same, it's going back, it don't go forward. Now, I looked at that dusty road we got down there on Granger Drive, where I see the bridge we got coming. If we build a bridge, we can also put a nice road in there. If we don't build a bridge, like some people suggested, then we stop progress. The other part of that, some say take the bridge out, and I don't know what advantage it would be. But I'm hearing all these things going in my head. What should we do? Want to do what's right. But with 850 people coming to Florida today, now, 3.5 years growing, and it's gonna grow more. I think we need to make a conscious decision what we need to do. We need to be looking at now or the future. I hear about crime. Well, we got a sheriff department. We got a sheriff. He will get on that crime. We got a city police department will get on the crime. I don't think we ought to retard our growth because of crime. Crime could be, that's what we got daily sheriff and policemen for. So to get that. If we need to do an ordinance for loud music, you shouldn't have to be awake at night and be woke up by loud music. Get an ordinance for it and control some of this stuff. But if we retard progress because these things of that nature, I think we need to look at it again and study it. I've heard some stuff that really bothers me. I'm just wondering, are we thinking about now tomorrow? And it hasn't always been that way. Now, they just built that nice marina down in Dead Man Bay. That wasn't there 5 years ago, but it's dead now. Made a difference. And if others continue to build and invest, it's going to make a difference. That's it.
You know, I wasn't here 3 years ago, whenever this project first come up, but, you know, I've heard the same as what Commissioner Fiegel had spoken on. A lot of the same folks that's against the bridge today was all for this bridge, and it's, for me, it's, if we put a lot of this kind of effort and we push folks to go make decisions to go do this kind of work, it's kind of shameful letting the folks reach out and do the work and we don't push through it. I know things change and people can change their minds, but I mean, I also do, you know, Kenneth did make a good statement in, you know, looking at it, things don't always stay the same. You know, what's today is not gonna be tomorrow. Things are gonna evolve and things are gonna change, just as that, probably that same location has from 20, 30 years ago. It's evolved to what it is. It wasn't nowhere near what it is today, and it's evolved to something new. You know, you know, when it started out, I had a lot of calls, or several calls, a few calls on not wanting the bridge, but I guess it's my understanding that the folks that had kind of had their sights set on the bridge and they just kind of went silent, didn't really dive off into it anymore because they thought it was all done. And when they woke up, then that phone woke up. I mean, these folks were calling. And they were calling. I mean, they called. I mean, I think I spent a whole day talking to folks that was in favor of what they thought was coming from the get-go. Now, I don't know whether the right thing to do is to, like Commissioner Dent said, you know, you want to do what's right. I don't know whether it's right to go ahead and do the bridge. I mean, it's shameful that we put these folks in this kind of work and we don't go ahead and do the bridge. Or, you know, like Commissioner Moody said, do we take the bridge out? And I can understand folks wanting, you know, these canals and all these beach communities. I can understand people wanting their boats to pass through. A lot of the folks that I hear from that's didn't want it is about boat traffic and different other things that they're on the riverside, and there's a lot of boat traffic on that riverside. That's the main waterway. So You know, I can understand people wanting that access and being able to drive their boat straight up, right up to their house and dock at their house, so. You know, it's gonna be a tough decision for this board. There's no doubt it's a tough decision for this board to make. And, you know, I hate it that it's gonna be this hard of a decision based on, folks putting time and energy into something that transpired 3 years ago. And then here we are, something different, so it's a tough situation all around, So, I guess we'll just have to wait when we get to our meeting, and we get to put it on the agenda to vote on it, we'll.
If I may, the board's already voted on this. Is that not correct, Kenneth? Don't we have an agreement with FDOT?
We have the local agency program agreement.
So the board had voted for.
Yes, a new bridge.
Yes.
Agreed, okay.
In 2021, I believe.
Okay. So, anyone else need to speak?
I'm gonna put Kenneth on the spot, I apologize. I know that there has been some discussion of removing the bridge. I know that was one of the initial, solutions that was brought to the board back in 2019. Is there any issue as far as the fact that that's a subdivision? Is there any issue with removing the bridge entirely and putting, barricades or something in its place and having 2 dead-end roads?
Excuse me, our code of ordinances has a requirement that when you have a roadway that has more than 4 residences, we are supposed to have some means of a turnaround. If we were to create dead-end roads, obviously, people won't always necessarily adhere to signage, which will necessitate that when they go down there, they're gonna turn around in somebody's driveway. We can't knowingly route the general public through a location that they are going to have to leave public roadway and encroach into private.
The fire chief spoke well to that in terms of everything he said, being able to access water, being able to not having to get down there and try to find a place to back up a big fire truck to turn around, go back around to the other side. Some houses will be burnt down by the time they did that.
You probably have some of that same stuff going on today with the bridge that's there. Well, a little bit's there, I'm sure they're having to turn around in private driveway.
That's the only way they can.
I'm sure the same kind of traffic's going in there today as they would if they took the whole bridge out.
You got dead-end roads all over Taylor County, and there's subdivisions that'll get approved one day and have in on path that had dead-end roads in them.
No, sir, not in the last 24 years, there hasn't been one, because I've been here.
So we always have to provide.
We have
some
no
kind of-
subdivisions that do not provide a means for a turnaround at the end.
And I don't believe we considered that in 2019 when we initially discussed removing the bridge, did we? I don't recall that being.
And that is, when they go through the PB&E process, that is a no-build option. So what DOT says is you close that bridge. You have effectively stopped traffic from traversing that. The intent is that you've done that with the intention of replacing it, which is what we're doing. The schedule on the brochures that you guys got last time showed a 2026 construction start time. We're 3 years away. That's what we're shooting towards. Obviously, if it can go faster, it will. But to change direction now would necessarily, unless someone shows up with a big pocket of money, is going to push everything no closer than 5 years from now.
Can I please say something about the road? She had mentioned the roads down there, which are Lime Rock, where we are. And the Live Rock Road begins, it sort of cuts off at a certain place in that circle. And because we've been down there over 60 years and seen many storms where the water is 5 feet deep, we had to raise our house up after Hermine because for the second time we had 5 foot deep water and 2 feet in our house. And so what I learned, and my husband, and he bought my father's insurance agency. So I've been around insurance problems for a very long time and gone over to the coast around Shell Point area. And the roads over there were, they did concrete driveways and they concreted part of the road. But when you have a storm, it's really horrific. And I'm sure the emergency people can tell you about that too, is it just tears the road up because you don't have a good substrate to begin with. You're building over what was marshland. And when you have a big storm come in, it just tears up. And I have begged so many times after seeing the devastation I saw when I was young and in my 20s and 30s, but I went over to check for insurance. People had insurance with us on the coast. And their roads were just torn to bits. Their concrete was just disheveled. You've seen it, these big chunks everywhere. And so what you don't want to do is, as messy as it is with all the lime rock and everything, it really is worth it to just keep your good lime rock road. And, it's all over my driveway a lot, but I put up with it. I would not want a falling apart asphalt road. And as far as the bridge is concerned, I will say this. I know that these gentlemen have worked hard and you all have worked hard to get these grants. It would be nice if that could just be a little bit lower bridge. I'm not opposed to putting it, I would not want to turn around. You can't turn around where the end of that, where that bridge starts, without turning around on someone's property. I have respect for other people's property, and I also know that you need to be able to get out of there if you need to. And so I'm not opposed to having something in there that would be proper and reasonable. I just ask, is there any way to lower it maybe 6 inches? What the one you have designed, I mean, I'm sure FDOT could do that. And maybe there is a compromise situation where we'd all feel okay. And so I think that we all need to feel comfortable. The main thing when you're out there like that is safety. The main thing is safety. I've seen really bad things happen. So I don't, I think that we all need to be thoughtful of each other and thoughtful of the situation.
We will look back at the tidal epic, the extremes of that, and compare that to the lowest member of the bridge.
Thank you. Maybe we could compromise a bit.
Two sides, and I understand folks want to get their boats out. And I understand that aspect of it. You don't want to get it so low that folks can't get a boat out. When I go, even on high tide, to be honest with you, I'm 6'4". That's still not a lot of room for a bay boat, but it's something. So, anyway, that's, any more discussion from the board?
I just don't see any rhyme or reason to lower it.
Move on to the next item. Item number 3, board discuss the Army Corps of Engineers floodplain management study.
Hey, thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
And with all due respect, my comments are probably passionate at times. And I know that, and I try to check it.
An engineer, I feel
And if I don't check it sufficiently, then I apologize. But I always try to be professional. Okay, so I understand that probably ahead of before you getting here, you guys received the Army Corps final report for the Steinhatchee area. Hopefully that is true.
Yes.
So there are two parts of that. One is a report, and it is about 15 or so pages, I think, something like that, 15, 16 pages. The other is the supporting engineering appendix to that, which is like over 100 pages. So that's really the nuts and bolts of it. But what we did back in, and I say we, it was the county administrator and myself, we reached out to the Army Corps of Engineers and asked for their assistance through the floodplain management study. Sorry, one of those two. I don't remember off the top of my head. Study. To try to look at the Steinhatchee area as a whole and see if there were some means or glaringly obvious issues down there that was becoming more of a repetitive issue that we were seeing in certain areas of Steinhatchee. That being kind of in that First Avenue between like Park and 8th, that little corridor through there, we were seeing quite a bit of water inundation and even overtopping the road in some of your higher rainfall events. And then the second one was a little east of there at 13th and Central, where you have a bit of a basin that really doesn't have a lot of positive outfall until you fill up enough, and then it kind of moves on its way. That's how we started. Can I borrow the mouse again? I got a little ahead of myself. So I'm going to back up, and in typical fashion, you know, every time that we usually do a project like I was referencing First Avenue, if we, sorry, shouldn't have said that out loud. Anytime we get into a point to where we have an opportunity to draw on the resources of a state or federal agency, I try to maximize that. So when we first reached out to the Army Corps of Engineers, we said we had the focus of, let's see if we can fix Steinhatchee, fix the drainage issues down there. Well, they messed up because they said, you know, do you have any other areas? And so I said, as a matter of fact, we do. So we identified 9 more and said, you know, we want to look at these. And what I did is I talked to Hank, our Public Works Director, as well as Mr. Castle, our Fire Chief, and said, you know, what are the areas that we know that are kind of those repetitive scenarios? And that's the ones that we focused on. What you have for you today is the bottom half, D1 and D2. And then the rest of it is we are currently working on that. But getting back to what we have here is you will see in the final plan document of that, it lists a study goal. That goal is to reduce the risk associated with floods and evaluate and compare reasonable, cost-effective, long-term solutions.
What page is that?
That's on page 3. Looks just like this. It's not in the thick document, it's in the thinner one. Should be right behind that, sir. And I'll tell you a lot of it that you don't necessarily have to see it. Let me see. Okay. I think it is this one. It is, I think so. I'll do a full page. You see that, I can't read that because I can't. So what you see right there is it gives you the goals to reduce that, reduce risk associated with floods. We had areas that were not necessarily severe enough based on inundating homes and displacing people with detours long enough that we could get a cost-benefit ratio that exceeded 1, because we tried that with the hazard mitigation program, but you have to show that your benefits outweigh your costs. This one, we kind of broadened the area a little bit more to capture more of the Steinhatchee, to where it tipped the scales to where we were able to actually evaluate this. Everything in this that you'll see, it says, where's that? It is down here, that this is a conceptual level analysis. So don't think that the end result of this is a set of construction plans that are going to hit the agenda next week or the week after and go to advertisement. That's not where this is at. This is more of a macro view of saying, here's where we see some issues, here are some possible solutions, here's some associated costs with each of those solutions. You have the choice now to make which one of those you actually implement. And that's what it does, is it goes through, let me see if I can do it. This is really hard to break in my head here. So this is steam hatching, and you can see this area is the First Avenue area I was talking about, and then this area over here is that 13th and Central that I also discussed. So we looked at those two areas and tried to determine the extent of ways to keep these areas from affecting all of the neighboring residences, as well as overtopping those roadways. What you can see is that we looked at non-structural measures as well as structural measures. Non-structural is kind of like, say, 13th and Central. There's quite a few homes around the rim of that basin that we could buy out and relocate. That's a non-structural method. But then you also look at structural methods as far as, can we expand this culvert? Can we put a culvert in here? Can we dig a swale that connects this drainage path to this drainage path? So all of those, that full matrix of possibilities was considered. And then when we went through that, and I went through quite a bit of iterations with these guys too, another set of guys. We came up with this initial array of alternatives that you're going to see on page 8, and that continues over to page 9. What that identifies is 7, I believe, alternatives for the different, let me go back up here. 7 different alternatives that are spread all over these two areas in an effort to say, what if we did this? What if we put a bigger box culvert on First Avenue? Would that help lessen the severity of the flooding back up on the upstream side of it? What if I took and the culvert that's under 2nd Avenue, what if I added another one or I made it larger? Would that help alleviate some of this inundation? On 13th and Central, I've got a closed basin, basically a bowl. Is there a way for me to figure out a way to make that water go somewhere when it fills up? So what you see is alternatives 1 through 7 looks at those various different options. And then alternatives 8 through 13 are some combination of those. So it may be that alternate 8 is the combination of 1, 2, and 3. Does that do anything? Alternative 11 would be 1, 5, and 6. Does that do anything? And when I say that, does it do anything, is our measure on whether it was a successful option or not was looking at the water surface elevation prior to doing anything and the water surface elevation after you've done something. So obviously, we want to see, if we're doing something, we want to see an improvement or a reduction in that water surface elevation. So the context that I gave them was local roads, some of your higher order roads, we would have a recurrence interval of a 25-year time frame to look at. I told them, let's go to 50. We can't afford to go to 100, but 50 is enough that it gives me a margin of error there that I know at 25-year recurrence interval or less, I should have dry, safe pathways to get people in or out of an area. So that was what I kind of steered them to when we were doing this. This flow chart here, let me make this bigger. You can see that it is blue and red options. I hope you get this right. One is focuses on the west side, which is, I believe, is the blue. And then the red options are what's focusing on the east side of Steinhatchee, that being First Avenue and 13th. That's kind of our division line. And what you can see is you have those alternates, each of them individually, and then you start combining them collectively like it's stated in the table. And what you do is you keep going to the point to where you finally have combined all of the alternatives, or most all of the alternatives, to see is this going to give us a positive result, or is it not worth doing anything? And what you see is the combination of blue is only the west, red is only the east, but purple, red and blue makes purple, addresses Steinhatchee as a whole. Literally, that's why they did it. So, if we look at, I'm sure it's an easier way to do this. If we look at this table, the one here, this table 2-3, you start seeing that these on the far right, that alternative 12 and 13, those were deemed to be the most effective. It makes sense because you're doing more of things and finally getting to a point that is productive. And what you'll see is these X's are saying that this option is included in that alternate. And what you're also seeing is you're seeing the projected conceptual level cost estimate of each of those individual alternatives. So it starts on this page and then continues on to here. And most everybody just wants to flip to the back and look at the bottom line. And the bottom lines are, you're seeing that their cost estimate is a 2.7 million for alternate 12, and then 5.6 million for alternate 13. So we have to look at it a little bit more. What's the difference between 12 and 13? So 12 is a passive. Passive meaning I'm not having to actively do something. You guys are probably all aware that most anytime we get a lot of rain down in Steinhatchee, what do? We dispatch Public Works with a pumper, and they sit down there and they pump and pump and pump and pump. I mean, that for round the clock usually, or at least till that tank of diesel runs out. So that's an active effort. So one option, or alternate 13, is an active effort. It's an actual physical lift station and a pump that would discharge water from this point to the Steinhatchee River. That's why you're seeing a greater cost there. What you're also going to expect is that active measures have a greater long-term life cycle cost because they have maintenance and upkeep as well. So my preference is a passive. That being a culvert that's sloped. As the water rises, it passively enters into the culvert and discharges without Hank or his crew having to go down there and do anything, which is good because that's what you're seeing as the best performing alternative.
Yeah, I'm sorry, quick question. We could start with alternative 12 and then later add the pump and the additional culvert to accomplish 13, or no?
No. So the only difference you're going to see between, what you should see between 12 and 13 is the facet of how do you take the water from that 13th and central area and get it to the Steinhatchee River. One is a passive where we have a buried culvert, a larger culvert. The other is a smaller culvert that we force that water that direction. That's the only two differences. What I thought you were going to ask is, do we have to jump all the way to alternate 12? The answer is no. So we could progress and do the individual components of 12, knowing that all of those collectively will get to the same point.
But that would probably, that would be a solution for target areas?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And I will tell you that you'll see within here, if you have a chance to look through it, because it's at that conceptual level, there's a 40% contingency in these costs. So I went ahead and, because she was asking me about dollars, and we know we've got ARPA funds that we're earmarking for the stormwater, and it's only a certain amount of money. So how much do we anticipate that we would need of that when we're only talking about 2 of the 10 areas? Well, so I backed out that 40%, and that gets me just under $2 million. Now, that's implementing alternate 12, which addresses those Steinhatchee, almost all of Steinhatchee for this drainage. If we throw CEI costs, or let's say we've got 90 days in there, that'll top another 135,000. And then we put a design cost on that of another, say, 10% of that construction cost. That takes us 2.7, probably a little more realistically, if we are able to pull the trigger soon, would be a 2.2 million. So that takes it from that 3 million range down to a 2 million range, and still hopefully keeps us in reserve 1.8 to start addressing some of the other areas, which those areas aren't quite as extensive, with the exception of probably Courtney grade, for covering raw acreage as this one. So I think this is going to be the largest magnitude of the area. Do you understand and what I was adding to those costs? You heard me talking about design and CEI. It's because these costs in here, they're not including any design, any permitting, or acquisition. I intentionally kept them in routes that were within the rights of way down there to hopefully either minimize or eliminate that necessity of having to deal with private properties.
And mitigation, and do you think?
Mitigation will be a component without a doubt, simply because the 13th and Central area alone traverses a wetland area, as well as 7th. The connection between the crossing at 7th and 2nd is crossing an environmentally sensitive area. Excuse me. And then Park Avenue and 4th will also make a small connection to an environmentally sensitive area. So it will be an impact. Hopefully when we get inland, we can persuade them that's more of a freshwater, where your cost of mitigation goes down tremendously when you get away from the saltwater.
Is there any advantage in reference to the possible requirement for mitigation credits in having this study and having the suggestions from the Army Corps of Engineers, understanding their familiarity?
I don't think so, because if you look in the report, they put those caveats in there. They'll tell you, we haven't looked at cultural resources, we haven't looked at
pages of those.
Mitigation, yes, sir. So they're gonna cover their tracks very well. And I don't believe there's not any additional leverage, the report coming from the Army Corps, even though it'll be reviewed by the Army Corps later, because this is our deliverable. So the Army Corps did this for us. They gave us this, and that's what you'll see on that very first page is, here's your report. You do with it what you can, you do with it what you will. And at that point, they kind of, wash their hands of it. I think they would always be a resource for us for, like, if we do decide to move forward with this, the first thing I'll do is say, give me your model. Because there are assumptions that are inherent to every culvert that they put in there, what elevation it is. And if we can not recreate the wheel for the designer on this, we might as well. And I know they would provide that kind of information.
So it's fair then to expect that CEI and design with the project costs of 2.2, but the permitting may be a bit higher than that, including the possibility of requiring.
Permitting not necessarily, mitigation, yes. So I would say that typically when you throw that number in there, the design is inclusive of permitting. That's the submission of all the applications, the back and forth with the RAIs, that type of thing. That wouldn't include any mitigation bank reservations or acquisitions, that's right. And y'all are becoming, unfortunately, very familiar with that now. So all I was really wanting to do today was kind of give you an overview on resolving a problem in Steinhatchee. You have this, what we are suggestive of was that this was a way for us to at least get within the realm of reason of how we can address the issue that has been recurring. an overall magnitude of the cost that we would expect to incur if we implemented this, and then ask for direction of, do we want to wrap this up into a possibility of saying, okay, well, let's go forward with this and actually bring it to design with the intent to bring it to construction? Or are we not wanting to move forward with that?
I would say, if I could, Mr. Chairman, I would certainly be in favor of the first option.
I would hope so too, because like I said, with the bridge aspect, this accounts for a passive measure that should, I want to say produce, but I lost my train of thought, should perform for many, many years. And even in part of this, you'll see that it makes reference to the First Avenue. So those were done in concert. So while I was working with the designers on First Avenue, that box culvert size played into this. I was feeding that information into here so that they could incorporate that into their model.
So then there's, I believe I've looked and saw that there's no possibility of the resurface project having to be cut open to put another skeleton or something. It's all those things are already incorporated ahead of that.
Yeah, the last thing I wanted to do was cut through a brand new road.
We're all having conversations.
And Army Corps, even at first in this study, if you drill down through it, you'll see that their comment was the limiting factor wasn't the box culvert under First Avenue now. It's the discharge point, which is the sinkhole that connects up to the river. So the box culvert itself will handle more, but it's pushing against that wall trying to get through that sinkhole.
Part of this addresses.
It does. In spite of that, I still upsized the box culvert on First Avenue. To complement it, we added a means to go under 7th and then expand your discharge under 2nd. So instead of only relying on the sinkhole to get that water out, we provided an alternate means.
So you actually put forth additional potential volume by the additional routes.
That's right. Yes, sir. So we looked at the whole problem. Hank and I spent a day down there with them. In February, we did the same thing with the other 8 areas so that they can get our perspective and see it physically on the ground. We also, with this study as well as the other one, I reach out to like Chief Castle and Hank and some of the emergency management. We physically are aware of pictures and elevations of where water is at on certain days, and they calibrate the model to that. So they change the assumptions to try to mimic what we know actually happened so that they have some confidence in the results that this is going to produce. And when you go through this, the thicker study, a lot of what you'll see on these type pictures is before and after. So they'll list whatever alternate it was.
Well, those colors actually are a bit more reflective versus the black and white's a little more.
Yes, sir. Understood. Let me see if I can.
It's a lesser volume, of course, but a bit clearer with the color.
So can you type in there like 80? Let me see where I'm at there. Hit enter. Perfect. Well done. That was a guess too. Pretty good guess. So what you're seeing there is that table that we just went through with all those 13 alternates. This is number 11. And what the display is the maximum water surface elevation, the existing conditions before the alternate was implemented, and the after effect situation or condition once those have been implemented. Under, you see this 2%, that's that 50-year recurrence interval. So as you're going through there, you can, I know you can't see colors, but at least you should be able to see less severity.
Small volume.
That's right. And the colors, of course, indicate elevations as well. So the lighter the color, the lower the elevation. Okay. So I just need to know, you can't make a decision today, but from consensus, how you want me to progress or give direction to the county administrator. If she's going to direct me to move forward with bringing this back to you guys at some point, I'll reach out to request a proposal, and then I would bring that back for a decision to you guys before we actually ever signed on any dotted line.
For the design.
Yes.
We better contact the citizens down there first. Let them have some input, you know, they might say, we don't want nobody else coming this way. We like it just like it is.
Probably. Yes.
Because if you're gonna spend $5 million, $7 million down there, they need to have some say so about it.
True.
And some will say yes, and some will say no. Now-
We could certainly have a public meeting
It
while
would
you're
be-
seeking out the RFP, I would think.
Right, and I currently have, engineers under continuing contract, so I wouldn't have to go the RFP route. I have, in my opinion, I would probably use the designer that did the work, the design work on First Avenue. My thinking is they were responsible for the survey, they already have the control in the area, it should be more efficient for them instead of bringing a new engineer in there to do the same work. So that's why I'm hoping for some cost efficiencies, and obviously I will tell them I'm expecting some of that. When I present that proposal to you guys, that is obviously within the context of a public meeting where it would be adequately advertised, and we can discuss it then. If there is, overwhelming opposition, I'll back up and punt. If there's not, we'll go forward and do good.
I also say, I did host a meeting down there Thursday, and stormwater was one of the topics in a bit of discussion, but there was no one that was opposed to potential work on.
We've had quite colorful conversations and discussions about stormwater from the citizens.
The question wasn't, or I guess the focus wasn't to do the work or not do the work, it was when is it starting?
Understood.
So, and certainly, if we need to host another meeting, I'm not opposed to that, but I would believe.
I am.
We'll go back and have that.
Just for the board's information, we have a total of a little over $4.2 million in ARPA funds that could be spent on this project. So we're discussing a potential of 2.7 to maybe $3 million.
So yes, ma'am. So we know the overall extent that we might expect. Obviously, the design proposal will come in first. One of the components of that design proposal will be when you get around the 60% phase, you'll have a much more refined cost estimate. So that'll give us a better picture of where we think we'll end up. By the time we get to that point, Army Corps should be moved quite a bit forward on the balance of those areas. And it may be that we pick, and don't hold me to this, I'm just saying, maybe we're still able to afford 6 of the 10, something like that. Anything I think is going to be better than nothing, because the dollars to do this type of work doesn't come around very often. And now that we have it, let's try to do as much of that as we can.
And I believe we have to have those funds encumbered by December of 2025.
That sounds right. I don't think it's 4, I think it's after that.
So we do need to, at some point, move forward with expending those funds. There is a timeline.
Yes, sir.
So you need direction this evening as far as forward? Or
Obviously, the only thing I can do is you guys could give consensus to the county administrator, and then she would relay that, all right, we want to move forward with this, and we're seeking a task order to design this implement.
And we're in favor of option 1?
I think hopefully we're in favor of alternate 12.
Yes.
12.
His, so his,
13. 13's got a pump in it. We can do this next year.
$3 million. So I said option 1 when Mr. Douglas was saying that we could speak to the design process. Yes, sir, and I still support that.
I support the same, based on Mr. Dudley's recommendation.
Yes.
Thank you. Duly noted.
Would it be okay, could we move on to item number 8? I had asked someone to be here, and he's been here for 2.5 hours waiting. That Steve Whitney, the volunteer park owner, he might could help us with this.
We'll go ahead and jump down to item number 8, board discuss the volunteer fire program.
Yeah, we've discussed this now several times, and we need to to move forward with setting up these, classes and setting up this program. And I had discussed with you all, and I discussed with LaWanda, just some of the things about it, and I think we all agreed that we would need a coordinator, to coordinate this, these classes, this program. And then it's just a matter of, are they gonna be full-time or part-time? I kinda had it in my mind that they would be part-time, and then the compensation that we're gonna, give them. And the first thing that we talked about was $20 an hour. But I think LaWanda has been working on a job description and looking at the pay ranges. And then the next thing that, when can we start? When can we get this off the ground? And then, for our volunteer firefighters, well, for the ones that finished the program, we had talked about giving them a $500 stipend. Once they finish the program and they get certified, that they would receive $500. And then every year for their annual training or recertification, whatever you want to call it, $250. And then for our current firefighters, we had talked about giving them some kind of compensation, and I think we had talked around $25 per call. When can we get this program off the ground? We need to move with it, I think.
If I could, Mr. Chairman, my expectation for the initiation of this proposed set of data was contingent on the awarding of the SAFER grant.
That's not true. We talked about that if we got it, that would be good, but we also discussed moving on without it also.
I'm not in agreement. I thought we discussed the options of seeking a SAFER grant that would reach out to full-time personnel, or another option that would reach out to efforts of recruitment, which could be on a volunteer basis, which could include the volunteer coordinator. And so my expectation when we proceeded to seek that grant funding, and understanding that we still had the option in the future, regardless of the awarding of this consideration, that being the volunteer coordinator, that we're still eligible for seeking a full-time position in another funding cycle. So it was my expectation that we would see about the awarding of the SAFER grant, and that should we be successful, then we could implement hiring a coordinator and looking into these possibilities for incentivizing volunteer service.
We've already applied for that grant, and in the meantime, we can go ahead and set the program up as if it's gonna happen. It may not happen, but we can go ahead and do all the footwork and we can set it up. Hopefully, the funding will come along. If not, then we're gonna be working through our budget real soon, and we're gonna, I've asked for us to have some sessions where we can, each one of us can talk about our priorities for the budget, so then we can have it ready. If we don't get the grant, then we can work it into our budget. But I think we all agree that our firefighters save us a lot of money every year, and the only way we're gonna get them is to set up a new revised program where there's some compensation and where you've got somebody that is directly responsible for that program, that can market that program and make it work. So that's where I'm at, that we get it off the ground, let's get everything ready, and the grant, we'd know about the grant in June?
The first.
For as early as it could be later than June. They don't do the entire award all in one time. They'll send out so many in a week. So if we're not in that first round, there may be, so the last SAFER grant we utilized, it wasn't early on. It took a little while until we got notification. So
Okay.
it could range in a time period, but as early as probably June.
So Wanda, if we went ahead and, budgeted this, and then we get the grant, could we reimburse ourselves with the grant?
Yeah. I'm trying to go through the notice of funding real quick for some clarification. So one thing that is concerning to me on that one, which I said I'd really need to try to dig into it, make sure I know 100%, but under the hiring section of it, what we did in the past is if you cannot hire somebody before the award. And my concern there would be, because we may not be able to reimburse ourselves, or if we hired a coordinator, if, I don't know if it is or isn't, I want to verify it, but there is a chance, if it's like the hiring section, that we couldn't already have a recruitment and retention coordinator, because we applied based off of, we don't have one, we want to get one. And I just don't want us to violate and not be eligible for those funds if we already hired one. I'm not saying it is, I'm trying to dig through right now and get an answer.
That's the way it is with the other program that we use to hire firefighters. You can't
have an existing employee.
Yeah, start the process and then.
You have to be awarded before you start. And like I said, we can.
Well, I thought really that's what I did think that that's what we had discussed is, and I'd love to get it started now if we could, but I think that's what we probably did discuss was, seeing if we did get the SAFER grant. If that's a 3-year, I think it was based on the 4-year.
4-year for this program.
Yeah, that's right, it was a 4-year.
It's 3 years full-time.
Then we would kind of have to prepare ourselves to, if it was a success during the 4-year of the grant, then we would kind of have to prepare ourselves to fund it, the county fund it going forward.
Yeah, and I'm okay with that. I'd like to go ahead and let's establish the program. Let's get the, job description, let's get everything, the policy and procedure, everything that goes with it. And then if we don't get the grant, and while we're working through our budget process, we can go ahead and be thinking about what the cost of this would be.
And we've been working, I've got those numbers.
Move forward as quickly as we can. Now, so everybody's okay with that then?
We'll just need staff to bring back.
We need to get started, that's for sure.
Yeah,
We do too many talk and not enough starting.
And that's why I keep bringing it up, because I don't want it left behind and forgotten about, and then 2 years from now, we're saying what happened to
I
it.
only got one question about the whole thing. When you help somebody get certified, is it gonna be something to say they're gonna stay in Perry and work or leave?
Well, and I talked to LaWanda about that, I don't, it seems like if you're gonna give them 500 or whatever the budget number is, that you would have something that they would sign that says, I'm gonna stay here for a certain period of time and volunteer, or I will pay back the $500 because what we don't wanna do is train somebody free of charge to them, because the hospital's already said they'll pay for the physical. So they get certified, we give them $500 and they go to Madison County or somewhere. But if there's nothing that says that they couldn't work over in Madison County, but we want them to be available for us also.
Is that on a volunteer basis?
Say again?
Volunteer basis?
That's what it is. It's a volunteer.
Okay, well, let me tell you, ask this. If he's a volunteer in Taylor County, can he be a fully certified firefighter? He can have a job and be a volunteer in this area? Is that possible?
You can't get paid, by the county and be a volunteer for that county. There's laws against it.
Well, I'm talking about
Now, I can be a volunteer, for Taylor County, and I can work as a firefighter in any other county.
Another question.
Yeah. Another one, that I do know when you recruit, sometimes there's stipulations with that recruitment.
Non-competitive clause or something of that nature?
Non-competitive clause, and
There are rules as far as you can't work and volunteer for the same, and it has a lot to do with if you're volunteering, you could come back and say, well, you owe me pay for the time when I was working. But the other thing I'd like to add on, as far as the volunteer certification, the certification that we are going to provide, you cannot take and go work somewhere. It is a solely volunteer level certification. That's the firefighter 1 level. Firefighter 2 level is what's required to be employed anywhere. So we would only be providing the fire 1 level.
And we're hoping though, that, what will happen is some of these volunteers will, get interested in becoming the firefighter.
Continuing.
And, and come to work for us full time. So if it's okay with the board, for us to move on and establish a program and work it out so when the day comes, we're ready to go then. We don't have to wait another 2, 3, or 4, 5, 6 months. We're ready to go. So the other thing, now with the compensation for our volunteers now, I would like to see us compensate them. Number one, as far as budgeting is concerned, what options are there?
Okay, so are you speaking to the per call stipend now?
Yeah, the $25 a call, whatever the board decides.
Right, so we're not currently budgeted for that, obviously. So, I know that in the Safer Grant application, we included, I think, $10,000 for the per call stipend and $20,000 for the training hours, the other way around. So $20,000 for the per call stipend and $10,000 for the training hours, for the completion of the training hours for that stipend. So that was $30,000 was what we determined in a year based on 12 or 16
You look at
volunteers.
history to come up with the numbers, is that what you did, of how many calls we've had?
The original, when I brought the original program options to the board, when I came up with those costs, it was based off of the number of current volunteers and assuming, I think it was a 50% response rate. And I was just trying to come up with some sort of methodology to give us a number of a conservative basis of assuming a very good turnout on our volunteers, because the last thing we wanted to do was come with a very low number and then not have enough to continue for the entire year without needing additional
You
funding.
have the numbers of how many calls the volunteers answered last year, right?
Not off the top of my head. I'd have to go back and pull
Okay, so I
those.
would think that would be important data.
Well,
going forward.
It was based more off of our total call volume, because what I would anticipate, what our goal with this is not to meet what we're currently having with volunteer response. It is to increase our volunteer. We want to far exceed what we're seeing now, and not to say that our volunteers aren't responding. I'm saying that, but what our goal with this is of giving these incentives is that they're responding a lot more than they already are now.
And I think they will, but another thing is too, they cannot respond if they don't get the calls. And Steve can talk to us about that, where just recently, when there was a fire in Shady Grove, they were not notified. They found out by somebody passing by and seeing a fire.
Dan and I have talked about that a couple of times. So County Fire does not tone out volunteers. So that is something that unfortunately is happening when they're dispatched.
Well, how do we tone them out then? We need to be doing that.
It goes through the 911 dispatch. So there's certain steps and there's things that we are currently implementing to try to make sure that they're being, so we are taking steps to try to improve that. So we can try to capture the times where it's a drawn out process, but we dispatch over 2 different radio frequencies. One is the 800 megahertz with the slur system, which is what our radios operate, but our pagers operate on a VHF system. So they have to simulcast both of those frequencies at the same time when they send out the alert tone. So I would say that, what's happening when it's not going across is the dispatcher, whether they're in a rush or there's a lot going on, especially on big fires when they're dispatching multiple units, they may be forgetting to select that other button that's for the VHF. And we constantly work with dispatch, and plus they have new employees that come in and they have to train them back up, and then people leave, and then so it's a constant up and down with how it gets better and worse.
Who do we need to talk to fix that then?
And like I said, but what we're trying to do internally right now is for the lieutenant, the shift officer that's on, we're putting a VHF pager that they can hear all of the traffic on VHF. So right now on slurs, it may sound like the volunteer station's dispatch. But by giving the officers a pager to keep with their radio, they'll be able to hear if it went across VHF. And if it didn't, they can go to dispatch and say, Perry, will you please dispatch that across VHF? So that's a step that we're taking right now to try to improve that.
You want to skip to that?
Well, the VHF don't work at all. I mean, it'll beep, it'll let me know there's a beep, but being that we're so far out in different parts of the county, because we've been trying to get a tower up in that section for 15 years now, and no tower has ever been put up there to bounce off the signal. When it does, it's supposed to beep and then tell us what's going on. Like there's a house fire on Memory Lane. Unfortunately, all you hear is, so you don't hear where, what, how. I mean, and they have apps now for telephone, that the paging system that's really super, super cheap and easy to use. You just go click and it's all over there.
So it's not a dispatch problem, it's that you haven't been getting calls for how many years?
No, the pager for the last 15 years since I've had the pager since 2007.
Right.
I've only heard, I think, 2 actual pages on my pager. The rest is just static.
So do they not, the volunteers group not have the same radios as you?
No, we have the radios.
They have the slurs
We
radio,
have the
but
slur radios.
the paging capability you cannot do on slurs, which is why we maintain the VHF for paging. Now, and to add on, or to answer some of that, so as far as an additional tower, the VHF system that we have is not set up, so if we had a tower in Shady Grove, that would not fix the problem, because our VHF network, they're not trunked. So one tower does not talk to another tower. Now, could it be upgraded to have a tower and have them all interconnected? Yes. It would be very costly. Currently, the way it works is the dispatch, it talks to the tower that's in Perry, and it sends it across the county. And when you get distances, yes, that can create problems. If you're under trees or in metal buildings or under metal roof, like any radio. And we deal with these problems even with our slurs radio, whether it's career or volunteer. We are a very large rural county, and it's not great for radios. I mean, I don't care which radio system we're on. It's been a trouble for us as long as there's been a fire service. It's all,
Well, the app system will work so great.
Well, and we did try an app system in years past, but we had issues with that as well. And it kind of went back into dispatch again, where a lot of the times it wasn't being sent out until halfway through the call. It was an afterthought, or it was after the call was over. So we have tried, I forget what it was called. I don't know if you remember or not. But we did try a system like that in the past. But like I said, we had just as much issues, and for what we were spending on it, it was, like I said, it was a very nice system, but the other problem with it was it relied on the volunteers to maintain their phone, and if they were paying for text messages or if they had a limited number of text messages, it would, because it came across a text system, and where the pager is, we give them a radio. There's no cost. I'm not saying that the other system's not a good idea or anything like that, but there's give and take on everything we do. I mean, we can do one system, but we're going to have some loss in one area, vice versa. There's not a single answer that fixes anything.
What would help you, Steve?
Yeah.
What would help you on Shady Grove? What would be the best help you could get?
The app system.
Huh?
The app system. I've talked to people throughout the United States who were on the app system, which was multiple types. So you'd have to find the right one. And the app system, once once whoever is operating the main, who's actually inputting information, everybody who's gonna go available, it's just like a text, they put, go to available. And being that your phone has a GPS, county fire is now getting what's called smart comp, which is gonna be a GPS locator to show you exactly what emergency vehicles are responding. That app does the same thing on a map, and it's not near expensive, running these radios. So, I don't know, I don't really look much into it, but if I can speak to y'all a minute before I leave, I do want to tell you that I'm all about pushing this volunteer coordinator. I have 5 people ready to start training now, who wants to find out who they get a hold of, the physical, who can start getting the training, what do they need to do. And I just spoke with Dan before the meeting, and I did not just have him call him. I didn't want to bother him, because I know that they've been overwhelmed with their responsibilities. So to take on responsibility of training volunteers to help the fire service, I didn't want to overwhelm them. So, and I spoke with the ones coming aboard, because in 2007, when I joined, Chief Miller was the fire chief here at Tunnel, and Dan was here yet or not. But what we got when we got done with our fire training, they gave us this big old bulky, I don't know, boat anchor, looked like a helmet, but with all this special stuff, and it's heavy, super heavy. And that's what we got for finishing training, which is cool. But then we got hand-me-down bunker gear with holes in it, and was very unsafe. But like, if we do finish training, I want to make sure that they get new gear. The county, provides new gear for them, so it's safe, and I think that would help a lot. They also need, radio. That radio costs money, so they need to make sure with Safer Grant they have enough equipment that's going to, for every volunteer we get on board, there's proper equipment. Because Dan can tell you that radio is expensive, and they're expensive to maintain, so that needs to be added in the total cost of it as well.
Radios are ineligible expenses, but as far as bunker gear and all that, that was turned in on the Safer Grant, assuming these are the number of volunteers we're hoping to acquire, a brand new set of bunker gear for each one of them. And additionally, in years past, when I started here, we didn't adhere. Bunker gear has a 10-year life cycle. And I can tell you once a year, because we have a storeroom that has extra gear where people come and go, and that's how we equip people. Once a year, we go through that storeroom, and if it's over 10 years old, it goes to the dumpster. We don't send it to any other departments or anything like that, because it's no longer compliant. It can look like a brand new set of gear, but once it's 10 years old, it goes to the dumpster, because it's unsafe to use inside a burning building. So, like I said, but that's been a very long time ago since we've kept gear over 10 years old.
And like, I don't get paid to go up here and speak. I don't get paid to be a firefighter. It's something I love. I live in this county, and I want to take care of my citizens. Now, I do get paid on EMS, and I'm thankful I get paid, but I love that just as well, because, I'm here to help my community. And that's the only reason that I want to make sure that the next generation, because right now, the paid firemen I think they're down 4 positions, and the numbers are going to go up. So I'm concerned about, the coverage in the near future of what's going to show up in order to, what kind of personnel we're going to have. So got to build it somehow. And like I said, volunteers, for every 9 volunteers, you save $500,000 in paid benefits to our taxpayers. So
I'm encouraged by how many people already are wanting to start the program. I've had some calls. When we're going to get started? I said, we're working on that. So we've got, how long has it been since we've had 5 people that wanted to jump into the program?
I talked to them 2 months ago after the meeting, and got motivated, and I talked to them again 2 weeks after that, and then we had another meeting, and then I said, well, it's coming, and so how you keep the spark in the fire if you're not gonna fan it? You know, we gotta do something about it, we gotta get some more wood put on it, figure out what we're gonna do, it's not, the fire's gonna go out on it. You know,
I
we're
don't
not
wanna lose
gonna-
those
we're not
5
gonna do it.
people. I don't wanna lose the 5 people, and I wanna get this program going ASAP.
Yeah, I can get letters of
And we
commitment.
need
I'll get
volunteers.
I'm gonna refer him, for Chief Castle. I'll tell him to call him and he can coordinate with getting everything going. I also have a buddy who has his fire one, he's just trying to get on, he's just having a hard time getting forestry to do his, something with forestry, pack out or something, I don't know. But, I haven't always looked into it, but we haven't been trying for like 2 months now to finish up his, fire one, so he can go ahead and get on board too, so. Just waiting.
Well, I feel like that there's support here for this program, right?
I'm in support of it, for sure. I think, what do we need to do? We need to direct staff to come back with some numbers.
Yeah, that would be.
I think that's kind of a starting point to come, to get some numbers and cost and.
I would ask that in the direction to us, going back is to one, make sure if we implement anything now, it will not hinder our safer grant, should we be awarded.
I'm not for implementing anything. I think we're just discussing bringing back potential numbers. And I think we need to, even if we're talking about $25 and these $500, that's kind of something that we can't really, you don't know how many folks are gonna go, but as far as your calls, we can kind of maybe gauge how many calls we tend to have and try to put some money in there because I mean, the numbers are gonna be for us when we get through budget season. So.
Well, but we can, if the board will instruct me to move forward, we can bring back, well, we already have a draft job description, and we can bring back some policies so that when we get closer to moving forward with the program, that won't hinder us. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, and I'd like to know, where we're gonna have the classes and when, some kind of idea of when we might be able to start the first, because we got 5 people waiting.
Well, they could start now, couldn't they, Dan?
We can start them under the online program as we did before, and I can't remember the gentleman's name, but the one that he recently had to back out for medical reasons. But like, we were gonna start him on the online. Personally, I don't like the online program, but it is something that we can get people started now. That's the fastest option that we can get, at least get them in and try to get them started. What I would prefer to see in the big picture is the return to the traditional classroom courses. But like I said, that comes with getting the online, the volunteer coordinator online. Because that would be the person.
Do that until you know about the grant award.
Yeah, until I can clarify to make sure that we wouldn't turn it into an ineligible expense that we couldn't be.
I mean, what I say is I've gotten calls about the same consideration, and I believe it was brought up where we're 4 to 5 full-time firefighters are vacant.
3 right now.
So you've got 3 vacant full-time positions. And so my concern about that, while we're speaking about volunteers, is that we need to be just as concerned about how do we recruit and how do we reach out to this gap that we have in respect to volunteers, but also not neglect our full-time firefighters. So I'm not saying that that's something, a magical answer we can come up with tonight, but what I'm saying is, I think a lot of this information is going to be contingent upon the awarding of the SAFER grant. And if not, then in my mind, these are conversations that should have taken place last July. And we could have already had those in our current budget. But I'm not familiar with that coming up in the last 2 years, at least in a budget cycle. But I do think we've had some ongoing needs in respect to our volunteers as well as our full-time firefighters. Is that safe?
I would agree that we do need to look at the recruitment, not just of our volunteers, but recruitment and retention of our career staff. We are.
If I could, are they going to be, how are they going to be impacted about compression with the minimum wage issue with the current folks that we have?
if the board continues on its current path, where last year we gave $1 an hour starting salary, if the board continues in that path where it's not just where it's a countywide increase instead of just bringing the minimum wage, if you continue in that path, we won't have the compression. But if we only raise the bottom wage, then yes, we're going to have compression issues.
And add to the problem that we have with recruitment or retention for our folks that are already on staff.
In addition, I mean, there's other things that we're looking at, starting salaries compared to other agencies currently. I don't want to get into that because we need to review that with county manager.
I want to say something to that too. I'm not going to go into detail tonight, but that's one of the things that I wanted to discuss when we have these budget hearings, because that's number one on my list. Now, I'm not going to go into details, but I have plans to discuss recruitment, retention. I have some ideas. So, we've sat here for 2 years. You're right, Commissioner Newman, and not one of us has said anything about this until I brought it up. So, we should have already been talking about it, but, and now is better than not. So I would like to see us, if we get the safer grant, fine, but I think we need to talk about it in our budget process, just in case that we don't get it, that we can fund it.
So just to talk about it a little bit, if we hired a part-time, 20 hours a week, recruitment and retention coordinator, and had the per call stipend and the training hour stipend, that total is somewhere around $62,000 a year is what we're looking at. So y'all can, have that number in your head. Now, at the next workshop we have, I have asked our finance director to bring forward the impact of the $1 an hour rate increase versus, and also, the $1 an hour salary increase, that if the board wishes to consider that, because the fire department is one department that would be impacted by that, since our firefighters make under $15 an hour. So that will have a financial impact as well. So that's something that we can certainly discuss moving forward.
Yeah, I want to. I'm embarrassed about what our firefighters make. That is embarrassing that we don't give them any more money than what they get. They have to go get certified, trained, and it's I don't know another word except it's embarrassing. The little bit of money that we give our firefighters. No wonder we can't keep people, and no wonder we can't get people.
It just takes a little bit more training. I can get my fire too, and then apply for Dan, come work for him, but there's no way I would, because recruitment and retention, you ask all of pay is important, but personnel is more important. To know that, you can't have a 22-year-old kid who ain't never been in a fire, go sit down there and see the hatching. He's gonna be fighting that fire by himself for at least 20, 30 minutes till backup comes. You ask the personnel here, they're gonna tell you right now that lack of personnel is one of the big concerns. Why would I have to kill myself on a scene for 3 hours when I can go a couple counties over, make $3 an hour more, and have a whole bunch of personnel? So there's only 15 people on scene versus 3 or 4.
Well, we got issues, and I intend to work on
That's what, building the volunteer base, is gonna help with. It's a personnel issue. Now, as for the money issue, I can't tell you, but, you put 2 people at Cena Hatch, that's what the future's coming. You wanna put 2 at the beaches, you wanna put 1 at Station 8, you wanna put 2 at Station 2, and then 3 at Station 1. That's a whole lot of personnel you're gonna pay, retirement and all that. But it goes back to volunteers. Do it for nothing. But you gotta build that volunteer base. I'm not saying that the future's gonna do it for nothing, but even that, the little stipend that's being asked for, is nothing considering you're building up your personnel, and they're fully trained on fire ones, with first responders. So it's not like they don't know what they're doing, they're trained. And so they're gonna be responding, backing up these paid firefighters. But most time, we're first on the scene when we get paged out to the scene. And we already, started flying or taking care of what needs to be taken care of, but, that's either here or there.
I just need guidance from the board as far as.
So the direction I'm hearing that for this volunteer recruiting position, that we're asking for staff to go bring back some numbers to the board, is that what?
Sure.
Is that for the
For what
coordinator now?
For the safer grant qualification or for
No.
what?
You want it for budget, for during, bring it back for, in the upcoming budget?
Budget, but I mean, I think in the meantime, there's some moving parts there waiting on, we're gonna see if we get the safer grant, and then I think what I'm hearing, even if we don't get the safer grant, we're gonna maybe look the budget for it. To talk about it during our budget sessions.
Yes.
That's the direction I'm hearing, but. Alright, number 5, the board discussed request for purchase of county property.
Recently, I have received several phone calls from individuals, realtors, et cetera, folks who wish to know what our process is if they're interested in purchasing county property. Part of the reason for this is most likely because the board has taken a stance that you would no longer close roads and basically, give the property to a citizen. So I would like some concurrence from the board, as far as how we handle those calls, because I would like to have some time to prepare an inventory of county property, which we really don't have, and also to determine how we can come into compliance with a state statute that directs us to have this type of inventory list and consider if we wish to designate any county properties as properties that may be used for affordable housing.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not interested in this board going into the real estate business. For me, if somebody, just like we've had in Steamhatch and some other areas, if they live here and somebody else lives adjacent to them and there's a street or something that's been there and the county has no useful purpose for it, and they would like to have that, then I think what we've done before is we said we would split it and give the option for each one to buy half of it. And I think that that's what we should do, continue to do that, not give it away. And, but just to advertise land for sale for the county, we don't need to be doing that.
I'll say, I don't think the request was really just to advertise land for sale. I think the request was more of, I thought we didn't know what we got. And I'd be interested to, myself, if no other board member is, then I'd be interested to know what we got. I'll just see you on the side, just see what kind of property we do have out there. Okay?
I think it may be
Not saying we're
helpful.
gonna throw it for sale, but I mean, I'd be interested to know what all property we do have out there.
Well, if we had property and we had, a certain, a company that wanted to come in here, then certainly that might be a consideration, but just to get a list of all our properties and say, hey, y'all.
Oh, no, that's not what I'm asking.
I'm saying that, I think it's
Yeah,
more,
that's
we
not what
have to just go more or less define the properties that we do have out there, and then, hey, this is what we have, do you wanna do anything with it?
Well, and then that would be a tool that you could use if someone does come forward and say, I want to purchase this property, then at least we'll know what we have.
Is that the kind of, what kind of calls have you had? What are they asking?
They want to buy adjacent property, or I've had realtors who have called who want to purchase county property on behalf of their clients. I had a call last week from Habitat for Humanity who asked if we could donate property to their agency so they could sell it and utilize the proceeds for affordable housing, which is allowable under the statute. But as of now, we don't have a list, we don't have an inventory, and the board has not gone through the exercise of determining if any of those properties may be utilized for affordable housing.
For one commissioner, I would be very, very cautious about, letting go of very much county property.
I'd say, given, I'm sorry, but if I could, understanding the growth experience that's going on in our county and the potential future needs, I believe is a great asset to have the properties that we have. I don't know where they all are at, but I would be in favor of understanding what this list is. And I would also say we had some sort of matrix or qualifications that would put this property in a place that's considered a greater future use, then perhaps if we had that in place and you were aware of that and someone approached, you could say, the board's already looked at that because of potential future use. The board is not considering surplusing or basically disposing of that property. And I think it would be a very handy and useful tool for this board and future consideration, not knowing how growth is going to take place. It would be awful that this board or any board, surplus the property basically, and then had to go out and spend 4 to 5 times that cost to try to secure something in the future use. Perhaps if we didn't have the ability to swap the Shady Grove property because of some kind of surplus, that would be an example. You wouldn't have that potential to come out and you as the county have what you need, and an adjacent landowner could make that kind of swap. So I just think it would be a very diligent process to understand the properties we have and to look closer at a formula of some sort to quantify those properties.
The only question that I have right now, with budget preparation and with everything else that you've got going on, is this something that you've got time and want to delve into? Is this at this time?
Mark would look that up for, wouldn't Mark?
I have a partial list already, it's just really refining it. But I don't feel that I have time to research.
I think we need one of those.
And I just want to be able to give folks direction as I receive phone calls. If the board is even interested in considering a parcel for sale, if you want me to have these folks come to the board individually and, get on the agenda and come to the board and say, will you consider selling this piece of property? Or do you want to wait until we have a better idea of what we actually have?
So do you have time to delve off into this then?
I can prepare an inventory list in the next, 60 days anyway, I would think. I mean, I have a list anyway, but as far as identifying parcels that could be utilized as affordable housing parcels, I don't think I can get that done before July. I think that would take quite some time. And I just want to make the board aware of that. I mean, this is a statute that's been in place since 2007. We've not received any indication. I mean, nobody's called us and said, why aren't you in compliance with the statute? I think many, many, many counties are not in compliance. I think that's a goal to work towards, but not something I can get done in the next few months no.
You don't have a problem just understanding and defining the list of properties that we do have out there.
I think that I can do that before too much longer. My only question is, in the interim, how do you want to handle individual requests for property sales?
We're not ready to do that yet.
Okay, that's what I'm looking for. If you wish, Okay, well, that's really the direction I was looking for. I did not want to speak on behalf of the board. I just want to know how to answer these questions.
Comrade has something to say.
Refer them to 125, 35, 37. The law is pretty clear that, before you sell a piece of property, you gotta determine that it doesn't have any use, public use. That's the law. So, them come flopping around wanting to buy every piece of property that the county has, you have determined that that piece of property is not for it. It's just like Commissioner Newman was saying, very well may be that you don't have a use for it now, but you might have a use for it in 2 years.
And that's my
Just
concern.
referring to the Florida statute.
If we have a business, wouldn't that be like a business wanting to come in and hire people, and that kind of thing would be?
Now, that's a different story.
Right.
That's a different story, like, for instance, when one of the things that was done many years ago when, you donate land or sell land for the prison, remember that? That's a different story. A total different story.
What statute is that you say we refer them to, Mr. Bishop?
Florida statute 125, 35, 37, and there may be a couple more. It's all in that little 125, 30 something. That's because 125 is the statute that we go by for running of the county, passing ordinance and all those kind of things.
The affordable housing statute is 125.379.
Well, I said, did you listen to what I said?
I'm not arguing, I'm just saying it's 379.
I know you're not arguing. You are.
Got my direction, thank you.
Board discuss trash collection on county roads.
Can I say this? Please just go into a long discussion.
Commissioner Newman brought this up, and we just did a little research. Do you wish to speak to it?
Yeah, so I think it's clear that we have a number of roads that have higher volumes of litter. And my consideration was, given the fact of the high volumes, is there a potential or justification for, more efforts to try to pick up this trash? So, this is a list. It's not something that's in stone. It's just something I felt like would speak to those higher areas of concentration and try to understand a possible cost. And if folks aren't in agreement with those locations, I can certainly respect that. I'm very familiar with a number of these roads, and I am interested in a greater effort to reduce the trash on the road. So that's the basis of this request.
To give you an idea of what I've done in my area about trash on the road, when I see a black bag of garbage thrown out in my district, I call the sheriff's department. They send my inspector or cuz out there, and they open the bag, and if they can find somebody's address in that bag, they bag it back up, and they bring it up here to the sheriff, and the sheriff carries it back to the people to their address and gives it back to them and asks them if they can't try to put it, carry it all the way to the dump next time.
Sure.
And that's worked real good in my district. I've had people actually, kin to the sheriff, and he'd give them, I heard, he'd give them a hard time. And and I appreciate him doing that. That got them people's attention,
But, some areas aren't total bags of trash.
I understand.
They accumulate to a total bag of trash, but the volumes just continue to mount. If it's a bag of trash, and certainly we can have a conversation with the individual. I appreciate the sheriff and those efforts that they take for that. But I think this particular consideration was pieces of trash, not necessarily bags of trash.
Yeah, Commissioner Newman, we're thinking along the same lines. I had a call from one of my constituents yesterday. We had a pretty long conversation, and he was telling me about, every week, how much trash he picks up on the roadway, not only just in front of his house, but he goes each way.
Right.
And he says it's beer bottles and it's McDonald's, this and that and the other, not bag, because I told him the same thing, that if it's a bag, that the sheriff would look into it. So he's very interested in trying to do something. So I had told him that I would agenda for the next workshop in April, that we start some discussions about how we could get the community involved. And that's not going to solve everything, but I know a long time ago, the chamber used to have these days where people would pick up, and I know in Madison County they do that, and so.
Done last week.
Yeah, so what I was wanting to do is at the next workshop, let's discuss some of these ideas, and I wanted to invite Dawn from the chamber and maybe somebody from PCDA and some of the community leaders and anybody else of what we can do to, and one thing that we talked about, we can discuss at the workshop is, putting out more signs and maybe some cameras on some of these areas that's really bad. And, I want would like for the sheriff to be here because we need enforcement. So we're thinking along the same line. So if that's okay with you.
Sure. I don't have a problem with that. My request was if we could understand the potential costs, and, if commissioners are in favor with that, for those areas and that cost, perhaps you could expense that out of your account, or my account, or if it was in total. I'm not trying to segregate or break anybody out. I know there are a number of volunteer efforts. I know there are a number of days in Steinhatchee, before the season and maybe during the season and after the season, that there's efforts that folks volunteer, go out on their carts and pick up trash, and they have a great participation. And they pick up it can be tires to bottles to paper and all of this. So it's some of those are bagged trash incidents that fall off of trucks or for whatever reason. Some of that are pieces that are thrown out. I mean, I don't know very many bottles of blowout. We've had some high winds. Maybe some of those have. I don't think so. But it just was a consideration to understand the potential costs. I don't think it's a secret that a lot of our folks in the public feel like that our county gets trashed in a number of ways. And they're not pleased about that, nor am I. So this was an effort to try to reach out and see another possibility to try to beautify our county.
Let's just brainstorm at the next workshop and see what we can come up with.
I don't mind further discussion. I just wanted to try to understand the cost per mile. And, however folks individually want to go with that, I totally understand.
I don't have a problem trying to understand the cost. I mean, I've obviously got some roads in my area that it's more of it's like it's a tunnel to the roll-off site. That's trash that's probably on trailers or just loose in the back of the truck. They're just blown out on the side of the road. I mean, it just looks like, it looked like just, no, it's not bagged, it's just trash just covered in the side of the road.
Pieces of litter.
So
Those areas close to the dumps are
it's just a funnel where everybody's going.
Yeah.
They're just seeing my area, it's just a funnel to the dump, so.
That was, most of those roads that I picked out were in close proximity across all our sides. And I'm not saying to take away from our sheriff's efforts. I appreciate that. I know they're guys, and he's on board with, being all in to help with that respect. For our volunteer efforts, this, in my mind, was something in addition to. It wasn't to take away from. So I wanted to know the cost. Each commissioner can see and understand that. If you see fit, you want to proceed understanding that cost and expense funds you have available, I would not oppose that. And I'd like to consider that and considered for future discussion at the same time. Again, I'm appreciative of all those efforts that are there. I just felt like perhaps this was something that we could do to get a little more additional support.
Mike Strickland and Mr. Wanda could call them, and they'll, like a bag of garbage blows out and it scatters all over the road, they'll go pick it up. They'll go down there and pick every bit of it up, bag it up, you know. They've done that a lot of times.
They have.
From Ms. Wanda.
Sure.
And
They do a great job.
They do a good job.
We'll discuss further at our next workshop, about what we're
I
gonna do.
believe so.
Maybe if.
Yeah, folks want to understand what those costs are, and I don't mind speaking to that,
Maybe
if
that's
that's possible.
possible. I think Commissioner Newman was trying to understand some costs, maybe from, I don't know how it was.
Per mile.
Per mile.
Yes, sir.
So.
And that way, again, if each commissioner knows what that cost is, and you see an area you want to focus on,
We can do it.
you can do that.
I have it for my
So we can discuss that. All right. Board discussed the draft amended salary schedule.
So this is basically a housekeeping item. I think I told you earlier in the year that I would work on amending the new midpoint and maximum within the salary ranges. Over, I would say since 2014, the minimum salaries have been changed upon direction of the board several times, but there was never any type of living document where the midpoint and the maximum could be amended based upon the minimum salaries. So rather than contract with someone to have this created, I just created it myself, and it's something I can bring to the board during every budget cycle, when changes are made to the starting salaries of these positions, and just ask you to approve it as part of the budget. I just want to make sure you understood what I had created. I think this makes it much easier for in the future as minimum salaries or starting salaries are changed. All I have to do is change it in the spreadsheet, and it makes all the corrections for the midpoint, maximum, and the annual salaries. So it's just, you know, it gives us some type of guidance to look at rather than try to, you know, calculate by hand or try to keep up with, you know, by board meeting minutes of what those changes are. So if you're in agreement that we can move forward with this type of document, I can just, like I said, I can just include it as part of the budget approval.
All right. Meeting adjourned.